Girl in the Shadows, Diamond Files Mystery Book 1. Written by Angela Pepper. Narrated by Tiffany Williams. Chapter 1. Monday, 9:20 a.m., Maggie's Diner, Norfolk, Virginia.
Have you ever wanted to strangle a man with his own belt?
I didn't know how to answer the question. Was my new boss, a 65-year-old man named Derek Diamond, mocking me? Rather than answer his question, I pretended to be fascinated by the old lady pink lipstick clinging to the rim of my chipped coffee cup. He continued,
Men can be pesky, especially for a young gal like you, Legally Blonde. I bet you have to beat them away with a stick.
That was the second time he had called me Legally Blonde. If he said it a third time, I would get up and walk out of the diner. I needed the cash, but I sure as heck didn't need another jerk in my life. He leaned in and asked,
Have you got a fella?
It was the most interest he had shown in me so far, and the last thing I wanted to talk about, especially with a gray-haired man who was old enough to be my grandfather. Mr. Diamond, why are you asking? I gave him a friendly yet professional smile. Does this have anything to do with your case? The temp agency didn't tell me much, except that you're an investigator of some kind. He leaned back and stretched his arms along the back of the booth, broadening his chest and revealing the roundness of his belly under his dark blue, waffle texture shirt. His clothing was firmly on the casual side of business casual. He wasn't in bad shape for a man in his 60s, but there was a reason the fashion world had invented men's suits and ties. The garments were designed to hide your humanity and your love of pancakes. He tilted his head to the side and said,
Allie, you're what, 22?
25, and it's Abby.
What did I say?
The man looked shocked, like he had never gotten a name wrong in his adult life, and this was some strange new development. It was hard to believe this was the first time, given how little attention he had given me during our introduction 10 minutes earlier. As he blinked at me, his brown eyes wide and bewildered, my feelings toward the man began to change. Derek Diamond was one of those guys who is so excited about the next nugget of wisdom they're about to drop, they forget the world doesn't revolve around them. He wasn't necessarily evil, just oblivious. And if I wanted to have a career in the city, I needed to lighten up and give people the benefit of the doubt. On the plus side, he hadn't looked at me anywhere except my eyes. I waved my hand. It doesn't matter. You can call me whatever name you want. It's only a week anyway. Call me Legally Blonde if it's all you can remember. He drew himself up taller on the bench seat, one eye twitching. I'd touched on a sore spot.
Abby,
he said slowly and clearly.
Abby. Say it 3 times and a name is yours forever.
He paused for drama.
Abby.
He grinned, revealing a row of perfectly square, perfectly white teeth across the top of his mouth and funky little yellow matchsticks across the bottom row. You got it, I said.
You got it, Pontiac,
he said.
That's from an old car commercial, before your time. It was a very popular slogan.
He pointed to his temple.
My brain's gotten filled up with so much stuff over the years, sometimes it takes me a minute to shove things around to make room.
He took a deep breath with his upper chest, visibly sucking in his potbelly.
But that's why I have you, Abby. You're young and sharp, and you help just by being near me. There's nothing like having a young person around to put the old brain on high alert.
I'll do what I can, Mr. Diamond, but you should know I have zero experience. He cut me off with a hand wave.
Just Derek. None of this Mr. Diamond stuff. It makes me feel old, and I'm not old. I've just been around a while.
The waitress came to refill our coffee. She said, "Food won't be more'n a minute, folks." I rotated my cup so she could see the lipstick on the rim. May I have a fresh one? She apologized and took away the dirty cup. Once we were alone, I nodded at the stack of papers sitting on the table in front of Derek. Should I prepare by reading the case files? I asked. I've already signed the non-disclosure agreement.
Sure thing, Abby, he said loudly. I hope you like reading about strangulation.
The buzz of voices around us in the diner all but disappeared. The word strangulation, said loudly, will have that effect on people. For good measure, he added in an equally loud voice.
But of course you're interested in strangulation. I've got a feeling you're a bit of
the paperwork toward me, but kept his hand on top of the pile. He had attractive, well-formed hands with long fingers like—
Look at this. Tell me one thing. What emotion would motivate you to strangle a man?
Without hesitation, I replied, anger. He smiled and lifted his hand from the papers.
Exactly, he said, which is why this police homicide report is a work of fiction.
I sucked in my breath over my teeth. You're investigating a homicide?
We, Abby, we are investigating a homicide.
And what's my job exactly? Taking notes, typing reports?
Your duties will vary from day to day.
He clapped his hands together.
Ah, here comes the food.
The waitress set our breakfast on the table and poured me a fresh coffee. I'd been hungry a moment earlier, but suddenly the smell of food disgusted me at Derek Diamond. What's going on here? I asked. If he was hit on the back of the head, someone was sneaking up on him. This doesn't sound at all like a burglary gone wrong.
Exactly,
Derek said. He had a glint in his eye, like someone thrilled to find another human with a curiosity similar to his own. Someone killed this guy on purpose.
You got it, Pontiac.
Chapter 2. 10 a.m. As we left the diner, Derek handed me a set of keys with an Avis rental car tag.
You can drive since this is your city,
he said. He was right. Norfolk, Virginia was my city and had been for all of my 25 years. With a population of around 250,000, Norfolk is plenty big. Unless you get tangled up with the wrong people, then it can feel too small. I scanned the diner's parking lot for the rental car, locating it by pressing the key fob to make the lights flash. Derek was still near the entrance to the diner, talking to some teenage girls walking a dog. I used my free hand to shield my eyes from the sun and watched them. It was the beginning of June, so the girls were delighting in one of their first Mondays free of school. While the weather was hot and humid, we hadn't reached sweltering levels just yet. Derek pulled his wallet from the back pocket of his jeans, turned to give me a wave, and then handed some bills to the older of the two girls. She gave him the leash for a small dog with a white, tan, and black coat. Derek picked up the dog and walked toward the rental car with the dog cradled in his arms. Without a word, he climbed into the passenger seat and set the contented dog on his lap. It was a beagle, either a puppy or on the small side for the breed. I settled into the driver's seat and started the engine. "Where to?" I asked as I turned toward my strange boss for the week. He met my gaze with a taken-aback look.
Aren't you going to say something about how I bought a beagle from two little girls?
That's your dog, I said. He chuckled.
What makes you say that?
You've got white hairs all over the front of your dark shirt, which I had a view of all through breakfast. Plus, there's a plastic margarine container on the back seat, probably full of water for him. You paid those girls to watch the dog while you went into the diner because if you had left him behind, he would have overheated or howled the roof off.
Very good. Except you're completely wrong.
Oh, am I? I reached into the back seat, grabbed the margarine container, and removed the lid to reveal the beagle's water. Derek stuck his nose in the air and said loftily,
You're wrong about the dog's gender. He's a she, and her name is Chewy.
I turned my head so Derek wouldn't see me rolling my eyes. I returned the water to the back seat and turned back, leaning over to shake the dog's paw. "Nice to meet you, Chewy," I said to her. "Is that short for Chewbacca, or do you chew on everything?"
"A bit of both," Derek said. "Let's just say you shouldn't leave your shoes unattended around her."
Chewy gave me a hound dog look of innocence and shook my hand. Her paw pads were as rough as her lovely pancake ears were velvety soft. "Are you a good detective?" I asked Chewy. "With that nose of yours, I'll bet you can find anything." Derek asked,
"What do you know about a beagle's sense of smell?"
"Humans have about 5 million scent receptors, whereas beagles have 220 million. The Department of Agriculture uses them at the ports and at the airport, where they're less disruptive than larger dogs like German Shepherds." I patted Chewy's ears.
"You're a smart girl, Abby,"
Derek said. My skin crawled with displeasure. For as much as I longed for people to notice I was smarter than the stereotypical dumb blonde, I hated actually hearing it. A compliment paired with my name always stung like sarcasm, even when it wasn't. Perhaps if I had been raised in a more nurturing environment, I wouldn't be so hair-trigger defensive. I gave Chewy one more pet before fastening my seatbelt and looking straight ahead. The air conditioning clicked down a level with a soft whir.
"Are you okay driving legally, blonde?"
Derek asked. "More than okay," I said through gritted teeth. "Just name the destination."
"Salon Ronaldo. You're going to get those dark roots of yours touched up."
Yeah, right, I thought. Salon Ronaldo was only the most exclusive and expensive salon in all of Norfolk, and possibly the entire eastern seaboard. All the rich ladies and their spoiled daughters went there. I couldn't afford a quick trim at Salon Ronaldo, let alone a coloring job. But I was this guy's secretary for a week, and I'd need to roll with his request if I was to stay employed until Friday. If he wanted to play games, pretending to buy dogs and go for swanky hair treatments, I could play along. At least it was more mentally stimulating than the other gigs I had worked over the last 6 months. My new boss wasn't joking about the hair appointment. Before I could talk my way out of it, a squad of black-clad Salon Ronaldo employees had swept me up in their luxurious embrace. 15 minutes later, I'd been shampooed and installed in a comfortable chair at what was the 4th best station in the salon, according to my stylist Richie. He was thin and compact in stature, and dressed in black like the other stylists, with one flash of color, an orange scarf tied around his neck. Richie's hair was a perfectly circular afro projecting at least 6 inches from his head. When Richie turned his head, he jerked it quickly, which made his voluminous hair ripple and quiver. "You have amazing cheekbones," Richie said as he combed out my damp waves. "I know everyone probably asks you this question, so just go ahead and slap me if you feel outraged by someone asking the millionth time, but I'm going to do it anyway. How tall are you?" 6 glorious feet. I gave him a weak smile to show I wasn't outraged. It wasn't the question that irritated me nearly as much as whatever people were bound to say next, usually a comment about how hard it must be for me to get a date. Richie, however, put one hand on his hip and said, "Must be nice. I can't even reach the good towels in the upper cupboards here." My smile strengthened. At the grocery store near my apartment, I'm always helping elderly ladies get things from the top shelves. It makes me feel good. If I were a man, I'd say I felt chivalrous or gallant, but there's no word for when a woman does that sort of thing. Richie gave me a playful head bob. "Girl, you be chivalrous if you want. The world is changing." I gripped the armrest of my chair and pressed my lips together. What was it about the hairdresser's chair that caused confessions? It had to be the cape. With the cape swirled around both chair and body, all that remains visible is the face. Without bodily gestures to communicate, our endless human desire to connect comes out through our voices. I didn't want to talk about my awkward height anymore, even though Richie was being sweet about it. I focused my attention on the unobstructed water view beyond the window, my gaze fixed even as I turned my head left and right as the stylist prodded me with one finger on my chin. I had questions to ask Richie, questions regarding the Kensington homicide, but I had to warm up first. I asked him, "Is this really only the fourth best chair in the salon? I can't imagine how you could improve on this." Richie leaned over my shoulder, his puffy hair soft against my ear, and said softly, "I'm not one to gossip, but the top-level station hardly ever gets used. It's in another room, upstairs. We tell everyone the second-level station is the top so they think they're VIPs, but they're not." He straightened up and fluffed my damp hair playfully. "Ivanka Trump goes to the real VIP room." I made a nonverbal sound to show my interest in more gossip. If I did nothing but keep my ears open for my multi-step hair coloring, Mr. Chattypants could gush out the information I needed without even being prompted. Or so I hoped. 90 minutes later, I'd had no such luck. Richie was telling me about his toy poodle's obsession with paper bags. The stories were enjoyable, especially when he used a squeaky voice to describe his poodle's innermost thoughts, but I had a job to do. I'd read through the entire police homicide report over breakfast at the diner, so I was familiar with the details. Then, on the drive to the hair salon, Derek had given me my mission, along with a cover story. For this morning's investigative work, I wasn't plain and tall Abby Silver, born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia. I was Deborah O'Dare of Tallahassee, Florida, passing through the city on my way to a family wedding in Connecticut. Since Deborah wasn't a local, people would be more willing to share secrets. And since Salon Ronaldo was the homicide victim's wife's hair salon of choice, I was in the right place to collect gossip. I was a secretary, not a detective, and I was barely a secretary. Even though Derek had given me sample questions to probe Richie, I couldn't get my lips to form the words. Another 30 minutes flew by. I silently cursed my nerves. I knew the case details. I had the questions. I had been in the chair for 2 hours and 3 cups of coffee and desperately needed to use the facilities. Why couldn't I ask Richie the questions Derek had given me, or make up my own, or even admit to him that I needed to use the washroom? Richie leaned over my shoulder again, leveled his chin with mine, and grinned at me in the mirror while his fuzzy hair tickled my right cheek. All of the bleaching chemicals had been washed from my hair, so he was no longer in danger of getting white tips on his afro. "Do we love it?" Richie asked. "We love it, right?" I swallowed hard. I needed more time. My employer had invested a significant amount of money in getting me access to potentially helpful information, and I was blowing it. I'd get fired, plus it would take me a future week's earnings to pay back the fees for the Salon Ronaldo treatment. "You hate it," Richie said with an exaggerated frown. "You don't have to say a word, ma chérie. Your face tells me your pain." I bit my lip and nodded. My face didn't lie, but it didn't tell the whole truth. I was hoping it would be lighter in the front. His expression brightened immediately. "Yes, of course! It's too even now, too matchy-matchy, like an older, more conservative woman. We must make it brighter at the front, where the sun has kissed your beautiful head." I squirmed in my seat, partly because the complimentary lies felt uncomfortable, but mostly because of the liquid in my bladder. "Another round," Richie said, clapping his hands like he was buying everyone drinks. "This one will be faster because the hair follicles are already open." He gave my damp locks another playful flick and excused himself to get more supplies. I hoisted myself from the chair and went in search of the washroom, too desperate to wait for Richie's return. I found an unmarked door. Behind the door were simple utilitarian facilities. I took care of business and quickly washed my hands, as eager to get out as I had been to get in. Judging by the quality of the finishing inside the washroom, it was intended for staff use only. My heart thumped. Breaking rules, even minor ones, always made me nervous. As I turned toward the door, I heard voices. It was a man and a woman bickering over who'd made coffee last. Apparently, the back wall of the washroom was quite thin, and a staff break room lay on the other side. I was about to leave the washroom when I heard someone say my name. Not my real name, but my fake one, Deborah O'Dare. The man, who I quickly identified as my stylist, Richie, said, "She's too young and edgy to be friends with Mitzi Kensington. Maybe she's friends with the daughter." The woman replied, with all the drama of someone giving testimony on a daytime talk show, "Honey, I'm just saying it's weird. All I know is when her assistant booked the appointment, he was very specific, and it was point by point the exact same as Mitzi's secret recipe. The same, honey. You've got to find out how she knows Mrs. K. Work it into the conversation, little man." Richie groaned. "I've been trying for the last 2 hours, but she keeps begging to hear more about my dog." "Honey, are you high? She did not ask you for more of your dumb poodle stories." He let out an embarrassed laugh. "Not with her words, but with her eyes. If you get her talking about Mrs. K, find out if she knows about those bruises we used to see on that woman. Those bruises have stopped now that her dog of a husband got what he had coming." "That man was a bad dog," Richie said with a surprising amount of venom. "I'm glad he's not bullying her anymore. Bullies are so mean." Something in the staff kitchen began to whir noisily, a coffee bean grinder, and drowned Richie out. I waited with breathless anticipation for more. When the grinder stopped, I heard Richie saying, "Every time I saw poor Mrs. K with bruises, I was tempted to pay Mr. K a visit myself." The woman laughed. "And what would you have done, Richie? Overprocessed his hair and given him split ends?" Richie chuckled. "I did what I could. When the police questioned me after the fact, I didn't say one peep about the bruises. But you and I both know that woman snapped and hired someone to take care of business." "You can't prove that," the woman said. "Why are you so sure?" "A woman's stylist knows," Richie said. "The stylist always knows." "You'd better keep your mouth shut," she said. "Killers don't like loose ends. Mrs. K likes you, but nobody likes you more than staying out of prison. She could send her guy after you next." "Don't I know it?" he said heavily. "I won't say a peep to another living soul, other than you." There was the sound of cupboard doors being opened and closed. "I'd better get back to my client. We're going another shade lighter in the front." "Good call." "And I'm going to tell her about my emergency trip to the vet clinic to remove 2 pounds of chocolate from my 17-pound dog." "Barf," the woman said. "Actually, the treatment did involve a large amount of barf." I heard some more cupboards opening and closing. Someone else entered the staff break room, grumbling about evil carbohydrates and needing to eat her lunch early. I exited the staff washroom quietly and speed-walked back to the 4th best treatment chair in the salon. I was grateful for my ungainly height, which necessitated wearing flat shoes. In my soft-soled flats, I was a stealthy amateur detective. I beat Richie back to the chair and was fluffing out my cape when he arrived with a fresh cup of coffee. Richie gave my neck a curious look. "Is that a bruise?" he asked. I reached through the opening in my cape to point at the brown spot on the right side of my neck, halfway between my earlobe and my shoulder. High voice, he declared, "You didn't do it right." He opened a cupboard and pulled out a kit that resembled a fishing tackle box. "May I?" He was already holding up discs of makeup in pale flesh tones. "Sure," I said. He began applying the makeup with firm triangular sponges. After a minute, I commented, "You're really good at this. I guess you've had to help your clients hide other marks like scars or bruises." "Sometimes." Richie let out a nervous neigh of laughter. I have a friend named Mary. She's into sports. She always had sports bruises on her arms and sometimes on her neck. How is she doing these days? Still getting bruises? He froze and gave me a wary look, the whites visible all the way around his dark irises. She's doing well, he said tightly. She's taken a break from sports and gotten into less intense hobbies. Good for her, I said. Is she happier now? Richie pulled back from me and coughed into his elbow. Sorry, I might be getting a cold. I lost sleep last week due to a chocolate incident. If you want to see a neat magic trick, my 17-pound dog can make 2 pounds of chocolate disappear. From there, Richie launched into the whole anecdote. I smiled and pretended to be fascinated. For the next 30 minutes, I wore a mask of mild interest while I got my hair lightened another shade. Inside, I was a swirling mess of emotions. On one hand, I was so angry at myself for not having the courage to ask Richie the prepared questions about Mitzi Kensington. It was just like me to succumb to nerves. I hated that about myself. I hated my weakness for choking under pressure. I'd failed hopelessly in my task, yet I had gotten lucky anyway. It was new information on April 5th, the night of the homicide. Mrs. Kensington and her daughter Megan Kensington had arrived at their home just before 9 p.m. They had been out of town for 3 days on a shopping trip. The women were horrified to discover Brock Kensington on the floor in the kitchen, unresponsive. Megan dialed 911 while her mother attempted to resuscitate Mr. Kensington. Mitzi could be heard sobbing in the background of the recorded phone call. The police and paramedics arrived at the scene within 20 minutes, but Mrs. Kensington had already taken several sedatives and could barely hold her head up. The police searched the premises and found signs of a break-in. A window at the back of the house had been smashed with a rock from the yard, and the home had been ransacked for valuables. Several electronic devices had been unplugged and stacked near the back door, a sign of the abandoned burglary. What the police didn't know was that the marriage had not been perfect. But now I knew what the homicide detectives didn't, thanks to the concern of the woman's chatty stylist. If Richie's theory was correct, we were looking for a hitman, hired by Mrs. Mitzi Kensington. Chapter 3, 2:15 p.m. As I stepped out of Salon Ronaldo, I was greeted by a loud wolf whistle from Derek and a howl from the beagle, Chewy. I shouldn't have whistled, Derek Diamond said apologetically as he approached. That sound sets off Chewy, but you deserve it, Legally Blonde. You look exactly like Reese Witherspoon. Not by a long shot. I shook my lightened locks and glanced around the parking lot self-consciously. Do you know how short she is? You'd need to stack 2 Reese Witherspoons on top of each other to make one of me. And more importantly, see my long, oval-shaped face? I look nothing like her. He shrugged. There's more to looks than how you look. Chewy let out one last hound dog howl before sniffing my hand while I stroked her dark tan velvet ears. I puzzled over what Chewy's owner had said. There's more to looks than how you look. It made no sense whatsoever, but at the same time was also profoundly true. An impression or memory of a person wasn't the same as a photo. And on that note, Mrs. Kensington's description of her marriage wasn't the same as the truth. Derek and I walked back to the car. It was still where I'd parked, away from the salon entrance, but in a tree-shaded spot. Papers and photographs were spread out on the back seat. Derek had been using the car as a traveling office for the last 3 hours, while I'd been getting my hair bleached to near invisibility. We got into the vehicle, and he gave me an expectant look. The guy, Ricky, was he loquacious? His name's Richie, and yes, super chatty. Well, another lady, I tried, but then in the washroom... Derek handed me a bottle of water. Take your time, he said soothingly. My cheeks flushed with heat, and my scalp suddenly felt like it was being poked by 1,000 needles. Despite the time-consuming foiling process, the chemicals had still irritated my sensitive scalp. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was a mess of red blotches. What was I doing, spying on people? Who did I think I was? My cheeks felt hotter and hotter, like I was about to implode from the pressure.
"Try breathing," Derek said lightly. "I hear oxygen helps."
I took in a gasp of air and blew it out noisily. "Sorry," I said. "I have a tendency to hold my breath when I tense up."
"We're not so different, you and I. But I've been around a lot longer, so I've learned a thing or two."
He picked up Chewie from his lap and transferred her over to my lap. I pushed back my seat so she had some room.
"Rest your palm on Chewie," he said. "Feel how she keeps breathing in and out."
The dog squirmed a little, but stayed on my lap. She was warmer than I'd expected. Her rate of respiration was faster than mine, so I couldn't breathe in rhythm with her or I'd hyperventilate, but feeling the rise and fall of her ribs settled my own breathing. I felt myself dipping into an underground cavern of calm. I kept my eyes open so I didn't dip too far and lose myself to tears.
"There you go," Derek said. "Tell me about Richie, as soon as you're ready."
I took another deep breath and began to relay what I had learned at the salon. I tripped over my words, but eventually got the story out. I glossed over the part where I'd lost my nerve and had been unable to ask Richie the questions, only to get lucky while using the staff washroom. Derek gave me a skeptical look from the passenger seat. Even Chewie, sitting comfortably in my lap, lifted her snout and gave me a questioning look with her dark eyes.
"Repeat that middle part," Derek said. "Which of the questions did you begin with?"
"You got me," I said, exasperated. I totally choked. I couldn't ask him anything. That whole conversation between Richie and the other woman was something I overheard when I snuck into the staff washroom. Derek's expression lightened.
"That's all? What a relief. I was worried you'd resorted to special favors. I had this one ambitious secretary who got guys to cooperate by—"
I held up my hand. "No need to explain. It was nothing of the sort."
"Because you wouldn't do something like that,"
he said. I shot him a withering look. After all of the supportive comments, he was back to being a clueless, thoughtless jerk. Through gritted teeth, I answered, "Of course not."
"Good,"
he said cheerfully, reaching for his phone. Without looking at me, he said,
"Excellent work today, Abby."
He shot me a quick look.
"Did I pronounce your name right? It is Abby, isn't it?"
"Yes, Abby Silver." He let out a chuckle.
"You're silver and I'm diamond. Together, we're jewelry. We're a match made in heaven."
"Or a match made by temporarily at your service." He didn't react to me, but continued.
"They say the devil has a silver tongue. Do you have a silver tongue, Abby?"
Based on this morning's feeble attempt at questioning, apparently not.
"But you've got luck."
"Luck?"
"Abby Silver, you were in the right place at the right time to overhear exactly what we needed. And luck is a skill, believe it or not. I've been a detective for coming up on 40 years now, so I would know. I'd be dead a dozen times over if not for luck."
He continued to poke at the screen of his phone. I rested my hands on the beagle on my lap, awaiting further instruction. I hoped our next destination was lunch. It was past 1 o'clock, and I had barely eaten any breakfast due to nerves, and the appetite-killing sight of someone else's lipstick on my coffee cup. Minutes passed, and he didn't say anything. Was he waiting for me to inquire about the dozen times he might have been killed? What was the next step with the Kensington case? Casually, I asked, "So, what's next, boss? Do we start digging into Mitzi Kensington's life to find our contract killer? Look for cash withdrawals from her accounts? Search the family tree for convicted felons?"
"The next step is shopping," he said.
New hair plus shopping all in one day? I said jokingly. Talk about a girl's fantasy of a Monday. He didn't laugh. He just handed me a credit card with his free hand while he continued using his phone.
"The daily limit's written on the back,"
he said, and he rattled off the 4-digit access code.
"Go somewhere nice. Does this city have a Nordstrom? Get yourself a dark, serious suit that fits like a glove, and no trousers. Get a skirt. Pinstripes are always nice. And get a pair of heels that'll add a good 3 inches to your height, or 4 inches if you can walk in them. Please tell me you know how to walk like a girl."
I snorted. Of course. Which was not entirely true. He patted his lap.
"Here, girl."
Chewie sprang from my lap over to his. He opened his door, let her hop out first, and stepped out of the car. He leaned back in for the leash and held out his hand.
"I'll take the keys,"
he said. "You're driving us to the mall? Sure, I can navigate."
"Actually, you're going shopping on your own, if you can handle that. I'll be taking the hound for a walk and finding a cafe with internet access."
I passed him the keys and stepped out of the vehicle. The sunshine caught my lightened hair, and I got the sensation I was glowing. "Should I leave the tags on the suit?" I asked, "so we can return it afterward to save money?"
"Abby, don't you worry about the budget. This is a big case."
"How long will it take? Going through all the woman's financials could take months."
"Bah,"
he said with a wave of his hand.
"I don't do months. We're going to crack this one before the week is done. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. You'll see."
He stooped down to click the leash onto Chewie's collar. "I'll meet you back here after I'm done shopping?" He started walking away and called back over his shoulder.
"Take the rest of the day off. Meet me here again tomorrow morning, same time as today."
He began walking away, moving quickly to keep up with Chewie, who had found an intriguing smell in the grass. He yelled back,
"Wear the new suit, Legally Blonde. I want you to walk tall."
Under my breath, I muttered, "But I am tall. In 4-inch heels, I'll be taller than you crazy old man detective." I smelled trouble in the hallway leading to my apartment. Trouble wore a specific brand of expensive cologne. With my bounty of shopping bags in one hand and my keys in the other, I cautiously tried the deadbolt. It was unlocked. Holding my breath, I withdrew my key silently and took a step back. At the bottom edge of the door, a shadow broke the pattern of light. A split second later, the door flew open. There stood my ex, Owen, with a bouquet of flowers. His red hair was boyishly tousled, and the tip of his nose was sunburned. He was on his yacht after a day of boating and enjoying the good life. The flowers were limp carnations, a cheap afterthought, likely from the bodega on my block.
"Look at you,"
Owen said, lust oozing into his voice. He let his gaze slide all the way down my body and slowly back up to the crown of my head.
"Were you always so blonde?"
"Were you always so prone to breaking and entering?" He made a tisk-tisk sound.
"It's not breaking and entering if you have a key."
"Note to self," I said, aloud for Owen's benefit. "Get the apartment locks changed to keep out nasty elements."
"Abby Cakes," he said.
"Come on inside, Abby Cakes.
Look at your new Prezi. I was hoping you'd find a way to show your gratitude for my generosity."
He shifted to the side, allowing me a glimpse into my apartment. When I had left that morning, my vintage 50s-era table had been sitting in the sunny corner of the apartment. The old table, with its yellow triangle-dotted surface, had been the epitome of cheap and cheerful, much like everything else I owned. It was gone now, replaced by an elegant round pedestal table. The same one from the magazine I'd pinned on my inspiration board months earlier. I'd meant to look around for a cheap knockoff in the same style, but Owen had bought me the actual designer table. "Owen," I breathed. I rocked on the ball of my foot, swaying on the precipice of giving in. The table must have cost thousands. Even for someone with his family's money, it would have been more than pocket change. It was such a sweet gesture. I started to take a step forward into the apartment. "You shouldn't have," I said.
"Too late because I already did," he said in his smug, sing-song voice. "The only problem is the new table makes everything else in the apartment look like the cheap crap it is. We can pick out a new sofa this weekend if you like. We'll get a big one in case one of my friends needs to crash here with us."
I swayed and pulled my foot back. "You're not moving in," I said. "Even if we do get back together, I need some time." He looked surprised.
"Back together? Abby, what are you talking about? We haven't been apart."
"Owen, don't pretend it didn't happen." The sunburn on the tip of his nose flushed darker red.
"Abby, you can't dump all this on me from out of nowhere. We didn't agree to breaking up. I didn't agree."
The bouquet of flowers quivered in his hand.
"I didn't agree,"
he repeated. "That's not how breakups work." I stepped backward until my rear bumped into the wall across from my doorway. "We can still talk things over if you want." He snorted.
"Talk? Sure."
He threw the flowers onto the floor. "Owen, I've had a long day. I'm temping now, so I had a new boss today, and it was pretty intense."
"Sure it was."
He eyed my shopping bags and my hair again. His anger receded, replaced by something else. "I've had a long day," I repeated. Huskily, he said,
"I see you've been shopping. Come inside and model your new clothes for me. What's in there? Something lacy?"
Something in me reached its limit, and a tiny whistle blew in my head. I turned and began walking away briskly. "Be right back," I called over my shoulder. "I forgot my purse in my car."
"Don't take too long," he said. "You wouldn't want me to change my mind and send back your new table."
Under my breath, I muttered, "Idiot." I was stepping into the elevator when he yelled down the hallway,
"Abby, you don't have a car."
The elevator doors closed on his protests. Two of my neighbors gave me wary looks. I clenched my jaw, aware of the tears threatening to spill down my cheeks. I silently cursed my tear ducts, or whatever stupid internal flaw it was that made me cry when I got so angry I could barely think straight. I just had to make it down 7 floors and out of the elevator without bawling in front of strangers. To take my mind off my fury at Owen, I began recalling the lines of a movie. I had the dialogue from a dozen movies memorized from top to bottom, but my favorite was The Wizard of Oz. I loved the film for its characters' unrelenting cheerfulness, even in the face of evil. And my ex, Owen, truly was the face of evil. Case in point, he'd nearly charmed me right into the trap he had set in my apartment. If he hadn't insulted my furniture and brought up his deadbeat friends in the same breath, I might have been weak and taken him back. Thankfully, he had shown his true colors and broken the spell. The elevator reached the lobby with a tired-sounding ding. I marched straight through the lobby and out the front doors into the early evening heat. It was 6:30 on a Monday. My nearest friend was only 5 blocks away. I would walk to her apartment and explain the situation in person rather than sob into my phone on the sidewalk like a loser. I turned at the corner and headed west. The Wizard of Oz played in the back of my mind on an imaginary movie screen that always flickered with the look of an old film that had been played 1,000 times. At the edge of my building, movement in the alley caught my eye. 2 people were moving a yellow-topped kitchen table. "Hey!" I said, "that's my table!" They were both guys in their 20s, with the smooth upper cheeks and scraggly beards most of the local artists wore. They immediately set down the table and gave me guilty looks. "It was just sitting here in the alley," the darker-haired one of them said. "There was no sign, so we figured someone was throwing it out." The other guy, with sandy hair and a red beard, gave me a charming grin. I'd seen him around the neighborhood before. He made paintings of nature scenes reflected on silver Airstream trailers.
"It's a great vintage piece," Redbeard said. "How much do you want for it?"
He was already digging into his jeans, which were artfully covered in splashes of paint.
"I have $5 and a punch card for a free sandwich."
"Never mind," I said. "Consider the table a donation. Think of me as a patron of the arts. I love your Airstream pieces." Redbeard looked down at the table and up at me.
"Yeah?"
He squinted against the setting sun. The other guy said,
"Dude, the rich girl said we can take the table. Stop gaping at her and pick up your end."
"Thanks," Redbeard said. He picked up his end of the table and they shifted into the shadows of the alley.
"See you around, rich girl,"
he called out. Rich girl? I looked down at my bulging bags. If I'd known all it took to completely transform people's impression of me was to carry some high-end department store bags, I might have started hauling my dry cleaning around in fancy bags years ago. Meanwhile, on the flickering movie screen in the back of my mind, a tornado picked up Dorothy's modest farmhouse and lifted it into the sky. Away the house flew, away from Kansas and everything ordinary. Chapter 4. Tuesday, 8:55 a.m., Maggie's Diner.
"Somebody likes playing dress-up,"
Derek Diamond said teasingly as I approached his table at the diner. "Don't be mean," I said. "You're the one who wanted me to buy this stupid outfit. Don't mock me for it."
"I'm not mocking you," he said. "Are you always this touchy?"
Rather than admit the truth, I pursed my lips and put my hand on my hip. Derek said,
"Anyway, you look like $1,000,000.
I was wearing the new suit, which matched his specifications. It was a navy pinstripe in summer weight wool with a short skirt. I hadn't asked for the skirt to be hemmed so short. With my height of 6 feet, most skirts off the rack were mini on me. The jacket fit like a dream. I'd paired the suit with a rose-petal pink blouse, plus the highest spike heels I dared to try on at the department store. The shoes forced me to straighten my shoulders and not slouch. "The heels are only 2.5 inches, I said. "Are they still okay?" Derek didn't answer. He was facing me, but staring through me like I had just reminded him of something more interesting inside his head. I took a seat across from him and picked up the menu, even though I had already seen it once and had the diner's offerings memorized. My eerily good memory freaks people out, so I've learned not to be flashy with it.
"No need,"
Derek said, using one finger to pull the end of my menu down to the table.
"I've ordered your breakfast already. The same thing you had yesterday."
"Thanks," I said. A moment later, my food arrived. It was French toast with a side of ham. The previous morning, I'd had an egg white omelet and a fruit cup.
"Eat up,"
Derek said, oblivious to my hesitation over the wrong breakfast.
"We're going to see the Kensington Widow today for some cheap and dirty sleuthing, and I don't need you fainting on me."
I ate up as requested. This cheap and dirty sleuthing sounded thrilling. When we'd finished eating and got up to leave, Chewie emerged from under the table. She had been sleeping quietly on the floor throughout our meal. Even more surprisingly, the waitress gave Chewie a dog treat on the way out. We walked to the rental car. Derek tossed me the keys, and we got in, him mumbling about me knowing how to navigate the city best. "But this isn't your first time in Norfolk," I said.
"No,"
he said slowly.
"I was here for another case, 17 years ago."
"You're not friends with the people who own that diner?"
"Not yet, but I do like the pancakes."
"Why did they let Chewie sit under the table?" He adjusted her position on his lap and held her floppy ears up like airplane wings.
"Because she's so cute. Isn't that right, Chewie? Who's a cute girl? Who?"
Chewie responded by pointing her nose up and vocalizing with a loud howl. I fastened my seatbelt, punched the address for the Kensington residence into the car's navigation, and started driving. 5 minutes later, Derek said,
"How'd you do that? I didn't give you the address yet."
"I read the case file yesterday," I said, and didn't explain further. As much as I tried not to flaunt my memory, sometimes it was hard to resist. The Kensington residence was a $1 million waterfront estate in Larchmont. I parked the car on the cobblestone driveway and checked my hair and makeup. Being in the ritzy neighborhood made me doubt my wardrobe decision. The suit had looked luxurious compared to my regular clothes, but was it good enough for Larchmont? And was it good enough to make up for my complete lack of confidence in the cover story Derek had given me? Only time and trial by fire would tell. We walked up to the front door, where Derek said quietly,
"Abby, will you please note that I'm bringing nothing into the house other than my assistant?"
"Sure," I said, though I wasn't sure which one of us was his assistant. In his left arm he held Chewie snugly. She was small for a beagle, probably the runt of the litter, and looked comfortable in the crook of his arm.
"Say it out loud,"
he said. I nodded to show I understood. He was recording this visit with a device somewhere on his body. He'd disclosed that much, but he hadn't told me what he was after. "Derek Diamond, you're entering the residence with nothing but your clothes and both of your assistants." He grinned and rang the front doorbell. A minute later, we were greeted by a woman with hair the exact same shades of blonde as my own. She was Mitzi Kensington, who, 2 months earlier, had turned 50 and also become a widow. A lilting male voice to the right of me said,
"Aren't you a lovely creature? At last we meet, darling. Derek Diamond in the flesh."
I nearly took a header off the front step. Back in the car, Derek had pulled on a crisp blazer and oversized sunglasses, but I hadn't anticipated a whole new showbiz personality. Derek reached out his right hand, flailing it like he couldn't remember how to shake hands. Mitzi squeezed his fingers, gave Chewie a tentative pat on the head, and then turned to me expectantly. In addition to gorgeous blonde hair, Mitzi had a perfectly round face and tiny blue eyes that were nearly buried in her face. It seemed her thick row of eyelashes were the only things keeping the upper folds of her eyelids from blinding her. Her eyelids sent me down a thought tangent. I wondered if she had seen too many terrible things in her life and her body was trying to blind her by swallowing her eyes. Derek nudged me with his elbow. "Abby Silver," I said quickly, "Derek's human assistant." She clutched my fingers with an icy hand before inviting us inside. From what Derek had told me in the car, this meeting had been set up for a week. Mitzi Kensington didn't know we were investigating her for hiring a hitman to kill her abusive husband. She thought we were movie executives scouting for a waterfront estate to use for a feature film. Mitzi took us on a tour of the house. The widow wore black, but not a dress. I'd always imagined widows in black dresses, and Mitzi didn't fit my expectations. In her tailored black blouse and sleek trousers, she seemed agile and dangerous, like she might pull out a samurai sword at any moment and demand to know the true reason for our visit. I'd never been so close to a murder suspect. My senses were on high alert. I was thankful that the antiperspirant I had borrowed from my friend that morning was the heavy-duty kind. We were halfway through the house, by my estimate, when Mitzi Kensington stopped walking and talking and gave us a shy smile. "Is it true Reese Witherspoon is in the film?" Derek was distracted by something Chewie wanted to sniff up close, so it was up to me to answer. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that," I said. "But between us girls, she's Derek's favorite actress. He's constantly talking about her." I finished with a wink for good measure. "She's wonderful," Mitzi said, glancing around to see where Derek was. A burst of adrenaline shot through me. Derek was doing his cheap and dirty sleuthing, and it was my job now to distract the widow. I couldn't stop breathing and choke up now. I pointed at the next room and asked excitedly, "Is that a corner bedroom? Does it get the ocean breezes?" Her small blue eyes squinted, nearly disappearing. Why would you need breezes for a film? Reese loves the ocean, I said. That satisfied Mitzi enough for her to lead me into the bedroom, where she opened the windows to demonstrate the cross breeze. She didn't show any signs of concern that Derek had wandered off. I breathed deeply and tried to relax myself before I blew the job and destroyed my new suit by soaking it from the inside out. Derek met up with us again 10 minutes later, reporting that he had made use of the lavatory. Derek's showbiz persona had a vaguely British accent. The three of us, 4 if you included our Beagle assistant, proceeded downstairs to the home's lower floor. We'd entered at what appeared to be ground level, but the home was set on a hillside, so the lower floor was a walkout and had the same spectacular view of the ocean as the upper floor. We stepped out onto a patio, where Derek held up both hands to frame the view. I pretended to be admiring the ocean as well, but I was checking out the site of the alleged break-in. The glass in the door had been replaced, but I could see scratches on the hardwood floor from where the shattered glass had fallen inward. The patio didn't hold any pebbles large enough to break a window, but across a stretch of manicured, new-looking grass was a rock garden. Mitzi waved at the outlook and said, "Megan and I love to have our morning coffee out here and watch the dolphins." She let out a sigh. That is, when she's not out with her boyfriend and too busy for her old mother. Derek gave her a knowing look. "They grow up so fast." From inside the house came a female voice. "Mom, why is there a car blocking the driveway? Chad had to park on the street like a delivery boy." Mitzi said, "Chad will figure something out. He's a smart boy." She walked into the house and called out, "Darling, we're over here. I'm showing around these wonderful movie people." We met up with Mitzi's daughter Megan in a chic entertainment room with a wet bar. Take-out coffee cups and soda cans were strewn about the room's countertop, and a pile of clothes and shopping bags, from stores fancier than Nordstrom, lay on a tightly upholstered sofa. This was apparently the area that 22-year-old Megan Kensington used as her own apartment within the sprawling house. Must be nice, I thought. Megan Kensington was a younger version of her mother. Round face, small blue eyes, and hair in shades of wheat and honey, but chin length and asymmetrical. She wore silk pajamas the color of a robin's egg and was rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Before we could be introduced, a young man strolled into the room from a different direction. He had his gaze on his phone and didn't see us.
"Megan, what's the deal with the car in the driveway? Has your mother finally gotten someone in to redecorate the master bedroom so she can—"
He stopped talking when he saw us. We must have been quite the sight, a towering skinny blonde and a fashionable older man in comically large sunglasses carrying a beagle. The boyfriend recovered quickly and offered his hand.
"Chad Harris, you must be the decorators."
Derek made a scoffing sound.
"Not my department, honey."
Chad looked uncomfortable. He had dark hair, cut almost short enough to hide a natural curl. His mouth was wider than average, and the shape of his mouth, plus the way his head bobbed as he looked from Derek to me and back to Derek again, made me think of Muppets. "These are the movie people," Mitzi said. Chad's Muppet head bobbed again. He still had his hand extended before him, despite Derek's refusal. I stepped forward, mindful that I was towering over him in my high heels, and shook Chad's hand. His handshake wasn't even as firm as mine, and his palm was clammy. He immediately stuffed his hands into the pockets of his designer jeans. His round head bobbed as he turned to Megan.
"You're not wearing those pajamas to brunch,"
he said. She grabbed a tissue and sneezed into it. "Brunch isn't for another hour." I glanced over at Derek. Brunch on a Tuesday? Must be nice. Derek remained in character, turning his head from side to side and framing imaginary movie shots with his hands. Mitzi cleared her throat and waved for us to follow her to the next spot on the tour. We followed her down a hallway. Behind us, Megan and Chad were speaking hurriedly but in hushed voices, so I couldn't make out what they were saying. My head raced with theories. Was Megan in on her mother's murder plot? Had young Chad Harris been involved? Brock Kensington had been a large man, whereas Chad was barely taller than his girlfriend and didn't even have the muscle tone to deliver a firm handshake. Chad Harris had an alibi, so even if he did have the strength to subdue a larger man, it didn't line up. The state medical examiner used temperatures taken at the scene to put the time of Brock's death with a high degree of certainty at 8 p.m. That was the same time Chad Harris had been at the airport, waiting for Megan and Mitzi, whose return flight from their shopping vacation had been delayed. The police had checked Chad's alibi and found evidence of him being at the airport during that time. But could the police be covering something up? I'd always heard the very wealthy could get away with murder, but I hoped it was just something people say. Was our investigation part of a police inquiry? Derek wouldn't tell me who we were working for on this case. I'd asked, and he'd changed the topic. Our client certainly wasn't the widow, or she wouldn't be touring us around her home talking about which rooms would be perfect for our movie.
A workout scene is always nice,
Mitzi Kensington was saying. We entered the room for a home gym. Mitzi seemed to be lost in an imaginary movie as she ran her hands along the row of free weights resting in front of a mirrored wall. The diamonds on her left hand picked up the sunny room's light and sparkled. She was still wearing her wedding ring, which made me wonder if we were on the wrong trail entirely. If she'd killed her husband, wouldn't she want to be free of him in every way, including the symbolic circle of gold? Then again, perhaps she just really loved the ring. When I returned to my apartment that evening, I planned to change the locks but keep the new dining room table.
"What's this device?"
Derek said. He pointed to a pile of metal bars, straps, and springs on the floor. Mitzi seemed to stop breathing. After a moment, she spat out,
"Junk. I'm throwing it out. Chad said he would take it off my hands."
Derek leaned over the pile of metal.
"It's an inversion device," he said with amusement. "I haven't seen one of these in years, darling. It's a human gyroscope, isn't it? You get in it like a little hamster in a wheel. Too cute." "My late husband was fascinated by ridiculous things," she said. "He was a real thrill seeker, not like me. I prefer to be right side up and in control of my faculties at all times."
"Me too,"
Derek said with a playful lilt.
"Except for Friday nights and Saturdays."
He let out a laugh that managed to infect Mitzi Kensington with a small chuckle.
"Next room,"
he said cheerfully.
"Tell me you have a gentleman's study with old books. We'd save the time and trouble of set decoration if you have one."
"You're in luck,"
she said, and continued giving us the tour. The house was even larger than it looked from the outside. It had to be 7,000 square feet. Several minutes later, we reached a room on the lower floor that Mitzi held back from entering. She stayed at the door and waved us in ahead of her. It was the late Brock Kensington's study. The computer had been removed, but the remainder of the room looked untouched, with an antique oak desk, contemporary chairs, and tall glass-doored bookshelves full of expensive-looking first-edition books. Mr. Kensington had worked his whole life in the shipping industry, starting in the billing offices and eventually becoming CEO of Avamar International. The walls of his office were decorated with highlights from his career, including a large photo of Mr. Kensington breaking a bottle of champagne across the bow of a new boat. On one side of him was a portly man, much shorter and wider, with olive skin and dark curly hair. On Brock's other side was a chic black woman in sensible heels. Mitzi saw me looking at the photos and commented from her position in the doorway.
"My late husband loved his work. Nothing else in life gave him the same satisfaction."
"It's a fun photo," I said. "I bet it was a fun day, smashing a bottle of champagne across a boat." Mitzi frowned.
"The champagne wasn't Brock's idea. It was his friend Roxanne who insisted."
She fiddled at the center of her clavicle like she was adjusting an invisible string of pearls.
It was a waste of perfectly good champagne, if you ask me.
Derek looked over my shoulder and clucked his tongue.
Handsome fellow, that man of yours. So athletic and intense. I'm sure you'll be happy to reunite again in the great beyond. He'll be holding those big, strong arms of his wide open for you.
He let out a low chuckle.
Not too soon, hopefully.
Both of Mitzi's hands flew up to her throat protectively.
No,
she croaked.
Not just yet.
She stepped backward, away from the doorway, like the room held germs she didn't want to catch. Derek continued to look around the study. He opened the lower cabinets of a credenza and knelt on the floor.
What's this? A safe?
He turned his head and gave her an innocent grin.
I just love old safes. This one looks like an antique.
It came with the house, Mitzi said.
Is it old? I don't know. Brock never used it. We have a box at the bank for my extra jewelry.
Derek jiggled the handle.
It's locked.
Chewie came to inspect, sniffing all over the old-looking dial. Mitzi cautiously stepped back into the room and came to kneel in front of the safe next to Derek. She twirled the combination lock and tried the handle.
That's odd, she said. I swear the combination was 1, 2, 3, 4. Brock didn't use it, but we reset it with those numbers because Megan used to love playing with the safe when she was little. She put her dolls in there and begged her father to bust them out of Barbie jail.
Derek looked over at me and gushed excitedly.
Abby, what do you think of that? Barbie jail.
I plastered a professional smile on my face. Sounds wonderful. More fun than tea parties. Softly, Mitzi said,
We were a very happy family once.
She stood up and walked over to the wall of framed photographs where she stared at the boat christening photo.
You have a wonderful home,
Derek said.
I apologize for being intrusive.
He twirled the combination on the safe and tried the handle again. The safe remained locked. Mitzi said impatiently, Just leave the stupid Barbies in jail. I'll deal with that later. Derek stood up and quietly closed the credenza cabinet door.
Sorry, I'm just the kind of guy who can't resist a mystery.
He waved to the door.
Please, Mrs. Kensington, continue the tour and don't mind me.
Certainly, Mitzi said, sounding tired. We continued the tour, but she wasn't the same woman we'd met on the way in. When she finally led us to the front door at the end of the tour, she was still smiling and polite, but subdued, like talking about her husband had exhausted her. As Derek and I stood on the front step, he thanked her again for the tour.
Someone from the studio will be in touch,
he said. Mitzi's cobalt eyes had a faraway look.
Have a pleasant stay in Norfolk, she said, her words hazy.
Derek started walking toward the car, calling over his shoulder.
Tell young Chad the interlopers have left the driveway and it's all his.
Mitzi closed the door without another word.
Chewie needs a detour,
Derek said.
This lawn will do.
He walked onto the manicured lawn at the edge of the driveway, nodding for me to follow. I took a few steps onto the grass, but found the spiked heels of my shoes sank into the soft dirt, so I stepped back and stayed on the hard surface of the driveway. Chewie happily followed scents around the grass before doing her business. The back of my neck prickled. I looked back at the house and saw we were being watched by Megan and Chad. My pulse pounded in my ears as I gave them a friendly wave. Instead of waving back, Megan reached up and closed the blinds. Chewie finished sniffing the lawn and we all climbed back into the rental car. I shook out my hands, which I'd been clenching so hard I'd left half moons on my palms from my fingernails. My heart continued racing. Once we were a block away, I said, "That was so intense. Is this what it's always like for you? I feel like I just ran a 100-meter dash, twice." Derek didn't respond. He wasn't paying any attention to me. Chewie gave me a sympathetic look from his lap. No wonder she had such a loud howl. She needed it to get her master's attention when he went off into the musty corridors of his mind. After a few minutes of me driving while he dazed out, I said, "Where to next?"
Huh?
"I'm driving, but I don't know where I'm going."
That's fine. Driving helps me think. Just drive around and show me the sights.
I drove around Norfolk for about an hour before Derek said, out of the blue,
Abby Silver, have you ever been in trouble with the law?
"I know where the police station is, if that's what you're getting at."
Yes,
he said distractedly.
Let's go there in person rather than call. I love to see the looks on their faces when I drop key evidence into their laps.
I frowned as I looked in the general area of his jacket's pockets. "You've got evidence to drop? Did you get something from the house when you wandered off?" He made eye contact with me briefly, and then his eyes unfocused as he disappeared into his mind again. I clicked on the turn signal and began driving to the police station. Chapter 5, 8:10 p.m. Driving. 9 hours later, it was nearing dusk when I steered Derek's rental car off Hampton Boulevard onto Magnolia Avenue. He sat in the passenger seat, and Chewie was in a travel crate secured in the back seat. We were returning to the Larchmont neighborhood, which was even more imposing as twilight settled in. The stately homes, with too many rooms to all be occupied and lit at once, grinned out at us with gap-toothed jack-o'-lantern faces. Our rental car was tailed by 2 police detectives in an unmarked car. We reached the Kensington home and parked in the driveway again. "I could wait here in the car with the dog," I said.
You've got the photos,
Derek said. "I'm sure you could do the whole thing." I rubbed my sweating palms on my skirt.
Abby, you'll regret it if you miss the best part.
Derek stepped out of the passenger side and retrieved his dog from the crate. The best part? I stayed in the car, breathing deeply. The best part about being a temp was clocking out at the end of the day and leaving your work behind. I'd been officially off the clock for 3 hours, yet here I was at the Kensington residence. Waiting in the car would be safer, but I would miss what Derek called the best part. Plus, I still had the photos in my purse. I pushed open the door and ran to catch up. The sprinkler system switched on with a sinister hiss just as I reached the home's front steps. The 2 homicide detectives, a man and a woman, came up behind us and quietly stood, waiting. Chewie the beagle was, once again, resting comfortably in the crook of Derek's left arm. He knocked on the door. I stopped breathing as the gravity of the situation hit me hard. This wasn't a joke or a dare. We were there to serve a warrant and seize evidence. In the 10 hours that had passed since we were last there, we had spent most of our time at the police station. Even rush warrants take time. I'd been surprised by how courteous the detectives had been to us. The name Derek Diamond had a cachet with local law enforcement, even though he hadn't been to Norfolk in 17 years. The door opened. Mitzi Kensington wore the same stylish black blouse and trousers she had worn that morning. Her face was blotchy and her small blue eyes were makeup-free. Her blonde hair had kinks on one side, like she had been napping. She looked at us, and then over our shoulders at the suit-wearing detectives who were holding their badges up high enough for her to see clearly. The female detective said, "Miss Kensington, we're here to follow up on some details of your husband's homicide. We have a warrant to search the premises." Mitzi Kensington said robotically, "Very well, then. Come inside quickly before the neighbors see." The detective asked, "Ma'am, is there anyone else in the home?" Mitzi plodded toward the kitchen stiffly. "No," she said softly. "Just me and the skeletons in the closet." She opened one door of her large refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of wine. "That's a joke," she said to the group of us. "Skeletons in the closet. Get it?" The detective offered her a copy of the warrant, but she refused to touch it. She sniffed the air just once and began opening the wine. Derek conferred with the detectives in hushed tones, and then the three of them were gone. I was alone in the kitchen with Mitzi Kensington. This is exactly why I should have waited in the car. She looked me up and down and proclaimed,
"By the way your hand is trembling, I'm guessing I'm not the only one who could use a drink right about now."
"Sorry about barging in on you like this," I said. She pulled out 2 glasses and splashed white wine into both of them. As she handed me mine, she raised an eyebrow and asked,
"You are legal?"
"Totally legal. I'm legally blonde." I squeaked out, "I'm 25. Thanks for the wine." Her tiny blue eyes were piercing.
"So, who are you exactly?"
The wine was warm, but not unpleasant. "I'm Derek's secretary. I only started working for him on Monday, yesterday."
"You should quit. Any man who asks you to lie is not worth having around."
She took a sip of her wine and leaned back on the counter next to the sink. She looked comfortable, like she had leaned there 1,000 times while entertaining another rich lady or two in the palatial kitchen. "It's a temporary position," I said. "I only have to last until Friday." She snorted.
"I knew it was too good to be true. After you left, Chad and Megan did some internet searches. The website your boss gave me was a fake. We thought maybe you were casing the place for a future break-in or that you were reporters. I didn't think you'd be tramping back through here again with that little flea bag and a couple of cops."
She looked me in the eyes as she sipped her wine. I didn't say anything. I did glance around for sharp objects within Mitzi's reach. Derek had assured me I was absolutely safe alone with the woman, but his words wouldn't do much to protect me against a meat cleaver. Mitzi grabbed the bottle and refilled her glass.
"Fine, the dog's not a flea bag,"
she said with a sigh. "I wasn't offended," I said.
"I actually love dogs, especially beagles."
"You probably think I'm a monster." "I think you're a victim of a violent crime," I said, which is what Derek had instructed me to say.
"A victim,"
she scowled. A door opened and closed somewhere else in the house. I glanced in the direction the others had gone. "Don't you want to know what they're looking for?"
"Not really, but tell me anyway,"
she said with a tired sigh.
"Clearly that's what you want to do."
Want to? No, but I was expected to do something. Quickly, before I lost my nerve, I reached into my purse, pulled out the photos, and set them on the kitchen counter. "These are shoe prints from the back of the house," I said. "It was muddy the night of the, incident. The police have a warrant to seize the same shoes that made these prints." I pointed to the photos that had been provided by the lead detective on the homicide. In the picture were indentations of pointed triangles offset by round, deep indentations. Based on the depth of the round holes, the shoes were a size 7 with 3-inch heels.
"You're looking for shoes?"
Mitzi made a scoffing sound.
"Good luck. If they want out of here before dawn, they'll need more than 2 cops to pack up my entire collection."
I set out the next photograph, the one I had kept in my purse. This was a selfie Mitzi and her daughter had taken during their return flight and posted to Instagram upon landing. Mitzi's shoes were visible in the picture. The pumps had a distinctive coral, black, and white design. The detectives in charge of the homicide investigation had dismissed the triangular prints as insignificant, but they hadn't thought to check Megan Kensington's Instagram account. Derek had explained to me that social media accounts were the new phone records of investigations, always revealing more about the users than they intended. Mitzi's mouth formed a perfect O as she stared at the stylish selfie and saw the truth revealed. "Mrs. Kensington, they're looking for these Louis Vuittons," I said, "and they're probably stained with mud and grass now, even though they're perfectly new in this photo taken just a few hours before you arrived home." Mitzi blinked at the pictures and began to sway. I knew that motion from hot summer days at track meets. She was going to faint. I grabbed her elbow and steadied her. She clung to my arm like a drowning woman, her thin fingers digging into my forearm.
"He was dead when I got home," she said, gasping. I didn't have anything to do with it.
But you did something, I said. You went outside for some reason. Did you go out to throw a rock through the window by the back door? Did you stage the scene to look like a robbery?
No.
She pulled away from me and stepped back slowly. I could still feel the ghost of her grip on my arm.
Of course not,
she gasped.
No, it wasn't me. It was her.
Her? Do you mean your daughter, Megan?
No.
She lunged forward, grabbed the wine bottle as well as the glossy photos, and lumbered awkwardly out of the kitchen. The lights flicked on in the adjoining dining room. I heard her sigh and slump noisily into a chair. Alone in the kitchen, I took a moment to breathe deeply. Derek had boosted my confidence, praising me for thinking of testing the driving route to the airport. He kept saying I had a naturally inquisitive mind. I believed him enough to practically interrogate a woman in her own kitchen. The nervous tremble in my hand was gone, which didn't surprise me. I'd always gotten nervous before a race, but as soon as the first starter pistol fired, I would become serene. A running machine. An engine. I'd been working for Derek Diamond fewer than 48 hours, and here I was, back in engine mode. What would I be doing next?
Are they arresting her?
I asked Derek in a hushed tone. He gave me a knowing look.
Not if they're smart, they won't.
We were standing together in Mitzi Kensington's kitchen. She was on the other side of the wall, in the dining room, sipping sparkling water and evading questions from the two detectives. Derek had already located the grass-stained Louis Vuitton shoes on our first visit to the house. The investigators had easily packed them up for lab testing and evidence. Now they were talking to Mitzi, and they hadn't even escorted us off the premises, so we were standing in the kitchen, listening in. Cheap and dirty detective work indeed. Derek opened the refrigerator and pulled out 2 cans of sparkling lemonade. He handed me one and set his on the counter. I grabbed a nearby tea towel and used it to dampen the sound of opening the cans. Derek's salt and pepper eyebrows rose in admiration.
That's impressive,
he whispered. I nearly burst out laughing. Opening a can of soda quietly was impressive? He was definitely trying to boost my confidence, but I saw right through it. I'd had a coach who had done the same thing, offering lame compliments for the smallest things. I was on to guys like Derek Diamond and their tricks. In the next room, Mitzi was getting louder, loud enough for us to hear what she was saying in the interview.
I didn't do anything wrong, she was saying. A woman has to protect her family.
The male detective asked,
Protect them? What did you do to protect your family? Who did you hire to kill your husband?
She let out a strangled laugh.
Don't be preposterous.
We know you're involved. The sooner you tell us the truth, the sooner this can all be over.
When do I get my shoes back?
Ma'am, they're evidence.
She yelled back,
Evidence I walked across my own damn lawn. I got those grass stains when I went out to meet you and the rest of your thugs.
The female detective took a softer tone than her partner. Mrs. Kensington, you were inside the residence when the first responders arrived.
Of course I was,
Mitzi answered with disgust.
All the neighbors would have been gawking. I was on the front lawn before that, before everyone arrived with lights flashing. That's when I got the grass stains on my shoes.
Are you sure about that? Is that really what happened? Mrs. Kensington went quiet. 2 minutes passed, and I heard only a few exasperated sighs. She should have called her lawyer, I whispered to Derek. He shrugged.
Her conscience isn't that guilty.
But she still shouldn't talk to them without a lawyer. Do you think she's just being cheap?
People aren't always rational,
he said. Maybe she's broke because she spent all her liquid cash on a hitman. Derek snorted softly.
If she hired a genuine professional, he would have done the whole job, including staging the burglary. If she threw the rock into the window, she was covering for someone or something.
But why? If she came home and found her husband dead, why would she make it look like something else?
You tell me,
Derek said.
Maybe he wasn't murdered.
I was being tested. I gave the matter some thought. There was another reason men were occasionally found dead by their own belts: autoerotic asphyxiation. This was the kinky, sexy stuff of tabloid scandals. After a moment, I answered, "She wanted to avoid embarrassment," I said. Mitzi Kensington was far more concerned about the neighbors seeing us at the front door than she was about the warrant. Maybe her husband accidentally killed himself while he was doing something private.
Also known as death by misadventure,
Derek said. I grimaced and raised my hand like I was in a classroom. I know, I whispered excitedly. He was doing something nasty in the gyroscopic gym equipment and accidentally strangled himself. That's why she disassembled the thing. Derek gave me another look of admiration.
Abby Silver, you have a dark mind. You really are a natural.
I beamed, and just as quickly, I wiped the grin off my face. On the other side of the wall, Mitzi had started talking, louder than ever. I'm telling you, the shoe prints at the back of the house aren't mine, she said vehemently. You know who wears the same size shoes as me? That hussy. One of the detectives asked, What hussy? She must have broken in, Mitzi said. That's what happened. Brock had broken it off with her. He was loyal to me, you know. He'd have these flings, but they didn't mean anything to him.
Your husband had a mistress?
A mistress? Mitzi let out a cruel laugh. We're not French, detective. She was no mistress, just a garden variety slut, a whore, a pathetic freak who couldn't get a man of her own. Your husband was having an affair? Not anymore. He dumped her, but she couldn't stand it. She couldn't let go of him, so she broke into our beautiful family home and she must have done it. That's what happened. She broke in, and when he told her to leave, she killed him. I shot Derek a look and whispered, She's making this up as she goes along. He held his finger to his lips. We both listened as she continued ranting, calling the woman every bad name in the book before breaking down into unintelligible sobs. The detectives patiently questioned her, probing for specific details. After several minutes, she composed herself enough to spit out a name. Roxanne Hartley, she said. You need to find out where she was that night. Take a real good look at her. My Brock wasn't perfect by any accounts, but she's worse. She's a killer. Derek gave me a puzzled look.
Who?
Roxanne Hartley, I said. She's not even mentioned once in the police report, but I know that name.
Great,
Derek said.
We're done.
The police will take it from here, I guess. Derek stooped down and roused Chewie from her snoozing position on a pillow borrowed from another room.
Wake up, girl. Time to go sleep in your real bed.
He looked up at me.
We can go now since we've got what we came for.
The shoes? I asked. So we're done with the case?
Not yet,
he said. I guess we still have to type up the reports. Derek gave me an amused look.
Not until we have our killer.
I'm sure the detectives will keep you informed. I mean, they let us come along and listen in to all of this. I thumbed in the direction of the dining room. What more do you want? Derek gave me a deadly serious, intense look.
I want to look the killer in the eyes when I tell her she's going down for murder.
I glanced away. Was he serious? Derek Diamond had some unconventional methods, but that sounded like crazy talk to me. I muttered, Oh, okay.
And if we get started first thing tomorrow morning, we'll beat the police to Roxanne Hartley.
Chapter 6. I got home at 10:10 p.m. and found my apartment still occupied. Specifically, my sofa was occupied by a lanky redhead bathed in flickering blue light.
Owen had apparently moved some of his things in, including a large television. Owen turned down the volume on the TV and shook a bowl of popcorn invitingly.
"Come get some,"
he teased. "You're psychotic," I said.
"And you've had a long day,"
he said, looking me up and down, his eyes lingering on the length of legs showing between my high heels and short skirt.
"You look great, though."
He set aside the popcorn and patted the tops of his thighs.
"Come give me a lap dance."
"You're disgusting," I said. He growled back,
"Just how you love it."
Shaking my head, I walked down the hallway and into the bedroom. When I had ditched them there the night before, I thought he'd take the hint and leave. Getting rid of my ex was going to be more difficult than I'd hoped. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed. In the quiet, I realized my left ear had a mild ache and the room had a slight spin. I'd had only a few sips of wine at the Kensington residence hours earlier, so it wasn't inebriation that had me off kilter. It was my intermittent vertigo, coming back for a little reminder of how one small problem with the tiny tubes in my ears could make my whole world spin. Owen was a lot like vertigo. I sighed as I surveyed his wreckage so far. He had showered and carelessly left his damp towel on the bed, where it would be sending dampness into the duvet and mattress. Owen had been wealthy his whole life. He didn't know how to take care of things or be aware of the damage he caused. I jumped up, ignoring the swirling in my head, grabbed the towel, and shoved it into the laundry bin. I cursed his name the whole time. I took off my expensive new suit, hung it in the closet with care, and changed into a sports bra, the nearest tracksuit, and my blue running shoes. The edge of the right sole was worn down already, but the shoes still had some life in them. I tucked my phone and keys into the waistband pocket, refilled my water bottle in the bathroom, and headed toward the apartment door. I didn't turn my head or even look at the lump on my sofa. I could feel Owen's eyes on me. He said,
"It's getting a bit late for a jog in this neighborhood."
"I'll take my chances," I said. "To get away from you," I finished silently in my head. 20 minutes later, I'd lost track of which lap I was on. The smooth dirt of the local high school's track made satisfying crunch sounds with every step. I lost myself in the running meditation. When life gets rough for some people, they drink. That was Mitzi Kensington's method for coping with police showing up with a warrant for her stained Louis Vuitton shoes. Other people play video games, gamble, surf the internet, sleep with strangers from a hookup app, spend money shopping, or simply self-destruct. I run. The first few minutes are tough. Sometimes I start off running too fast, like today. I run like there's something behind me and I find myself gasping, unable to catch the right rhythm. In those first moments, I wonder why I even run at all, if it means wheezing for oxygen while every muscle in my body complains. But I keep going, push through that initial membrane of resistance, and something else takes over. The engine. The engine is stronger than me. The farther I run, the more life's ups and downs smooth out into a flat line. My problems get smaller with every step. No matter the problem, running is my answer. They say when you have a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. Every time I hit an obstacle in college, I'd go for a long run and the solution would come to me. Except it was always the same solution. Quit. Quit whatever I was doing and run towards something else. I switched my major so many times, it was a miracle I even graduated. Not that my puny 4-year degree counted for much in the tight job market. Working for Derek Diamond, assisting him in an investigation, was the closest thing to an actual career I'd ever experienced. And it was fun. The experts say my generation should be worrying less about following our passions and worrying more about finding a job, any job. The fact that working for Derek was actually fun scared me. Was I chasing an illusion? If the temp agency placed me on more investigation jobs, assuming that was even possible, would it continue to be fun? The one thing that had always scared me ever since I was little was certainty. Specifically, when other people had certainty. Where did certainty come from? How did other people figure out what they wanted in life? I didn't even know what a career passion felt like, much less what mine was. In college, whenever I took an entry-level course to explore a potential passion, I'd find myself surrounded by dozens of people who were already experts on the subject. It seemed like everyone else in the world had been born knowing what they wanted to do with their lives, and they all had years of experience on me. What would it feel like to be so certain? The only thing I had any certainty in was running. Even so, I had to fight those first minutes of doubt every single time. Something was fundamentally wrong with me. I was broken inside. I'd come into the world premature and underweight. Then I defied statistics and grown to be 6 feet tall. Other people were roses. I was a weed, an accident that persisted, albeit aimlessly. Distracted by my thoughts, I didn't see where I was running and stepped on a loose pebble. My foot slid and twisted my ankle uncomfortably. I hopped through the next few paces. It wasn't bad enough to slow me much, but I might feel it tomorrow. Tomorrow. I had no idea how Wednesday would end. We were meeting at the same diner again, and then meeting with the woman Mitzi Kensington claimed was obsessed with her husband. My pace picked up with the thought of asking more questions. And then I slowed again as I imagined myself screwing up. Even now, replaying my conversations from that day, I cringed at the bluntness of my words. I'd actually implied she was covering for something her daughter had done. It was a miracle the woman hadn't slapped me across the face and kicked me out of her house. No, investigating was not my calling. No matter how much Derek tried to boost my confidence, it wouldn't make up for the fact I didn't believe in myself. I was passionless. The essential thing inside me that was broken would never stop being that way. The best I could do was let my engine take over. Don't think, just run. Don't question. Do the job step by step and go along. Don't think, just run. My mind was pleasantly blank when I finished my run and returned to my apartment building. The forced air blowing into the elevator cooled the sweat on my skin and made me shiver. It was a warm June evening, but I had used all the energy stored in my muscles. I hadn't eaten enough that day. I was empty, and I felt like I might never be warm again. I opened the door of my apartment. The television was off, but Owen was still there, using his laptop on the sofa. He gave me a wary look, nothing moving except his eyeballs. He looked at me the same way he might have watched a wild animal who had accidentally wandered into the apartment. I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with tap water, and drank it. The kitchen was cleaner than it had been the day before. My bowl of avocados and tomatoes had gotten overripe and would need to be thrown out. I made eye contact with Owen, who was still frozen on the sofa. "Good run?" he asked. Trust a non-runner to ask you a stupid question, like if a run was good or not. A run was always equal parts hell and ecstasy, and not the sort of thing you can express in words. I shrugged. I need a shower. You want someone to wash your back? I lifted the glass to my lips and let one final drop of water fall on my tongue. Sure, I said, setting the glass down. It was done. Owen would accompany me to the shower. He'd undress me, frown at the condition of my toes, and get the water the right temperature. I'd avoid his eyes, but let him kiss me under the hot, steamy water. Then I would take him to my bed. I would tell him it meant nothing and we weren't getting back together, and he'd pretend to be listening but wouldn't hear a single word. In the back of my mind, I'd hear my friends telling me I was being an idiot. I'd tell them I'm always being an idiot. whether I'm sleeping with Owen or not, so what's the point in torturing myself over my choices? I had too much uncertainty in my life. It gave me great comfort, because even though I knew Owen was bad for me, at least I was certain it was wrong. Chapter 7. Wednesday, 9:05 a.m., Maggie's Diner. Roxanne Hartley was the chic friend of Brock Kensington's that we had seen in the photograph in his home office. Her name had not been mentioned in the police homicide report, but thanks to my memory, I did have some background information. Roxanne Hartley was an admirable local businesswoman who had worked her way up the corporate ladder and now owned a cosmetics empire. Her chain of Hartley Cosmetics retail stores was a growing competition for Sephora. Roxanne believed in helping other women succeed. In addition to running the cosmetics chain, she was the founder of a charity that helped women in crisis. The organization helped by first getting at-risk women into safe housing and then assisting them with resumes and a wardrobe for interviews, as well as ongoing career counseling. I'd never seen the woman in person, but I had heard her interviews on the local radio stations. She was a winner. She didn't sound like the kind of loser who would have an affair with a married man, let alone kill him in a jealous rage. On Wednesday morning, I met Derek at the diner and filled him in on what I knew about Roxanne Hartley. He had done some internet research overnight and come up with the same basics.
"She's quite the woman," he said. "A real role model."
"But something's not right with her," I said. "She runs a charity to help victims of domestic violence. Why would she have an affair with a wife-beating jerk like Brock Kensington?" Derek gave me a sad look, like he genuinely felt sorry for me.
"When you've been around for as long as I have, these kinds of ironies don't surprise you anymore."
"Roxanne Hartley isn't much of a winner after all," I said. He looked me in the eye and said,
"It's not our place to judge."
"She shouldn't act like she's so perfect, though. She's a liar."
Spoken just like a 25-year-old who's only starting to see the world as it truly is. People make choices every day that are no good for them. I reckon you're not perfect either.
Whatever. I reached for my coffee, switched it to my left hand to avoid the lipstick smudge, and drained it. When the waitress came to refill our coffee cups, she gave Chewy, who was boldly sitting on the bench seat next to Derek, a dog biscuit and a head pat. People at nearby tables had been giving us curious looks, but nobody spoke a word to Derek about having a dog in the restaurant. Derek stirred his coffee and pulled out his phone to check messages. He frowned at the screen and informed me,
"We've got good news and bad news. Which one do you want first?"
I wished I was a good news first kind of girl, but I wasn't. Let's start with the bad news.
Our friends at the police department have beat us to the punch. They're already at Roxanne Hartley's office even as we speak.
He shook his head.
Tough break.
That doesn't sound so bad. I'm a Norfolk girl, so I'm actually proud that our local police are doing such a good job.
We'll see about that.
As long as the right person gets caught, that's all that matters, right? He grinned knowingly.
Sure.
He poked at the phone screen again.
The good news is we have an appointment to see Roxanne Hartley at 10:30 a.m., so we aren't far behind.
We were sitting in the waiting room at Hartley Cosmetics when the two police detectives who had served the warrant for Mitzi's shoes the night before strolled through, apparently on their way out. The other person in the room, the receptionist, hadn't taken her eyes off Chewy since we'd arrived. She sneezed into a tissue and made a grumbling sound as she narrowed her eyes at the dog. The male detective flashed a taunting grin at Derek.
"Diamond, you're getting slow in your old age. What's the matter? Did you forget to take your prune juice this morning and spend too long in the can?"
Derek responded with a good-natured headshake.
"This is exactly how I planned it. I thought I'd let you two soften her up for me, like the opening act who plays a few ditties before the real rock star comes out."
The detective chuckled and came over to where Derek was sitting. He clapped him on the shoulder.
"Good luck in there, rock star."
The female detective looked at me and shrugged. Boys will be boys. The two detectives left the waiting room. Their banter was probably typical professional teasing, but I hadn't smiled at the prune juice comment. It was a low blow to razz someone about their age. Derek, however, didn't seem at all bothered. He simply leaned over to pet his beagle and speak quietly into her brown velvet ears. He murmured,
"We'll get our collar, won't we? That's right, we will. Good girl."
The skinny, dark-haired receptionist stood and said icily, "Miss Hartley will see you now." She stepped out from behind the reception desk and gave Chewie a disgusted look. "Does that creature go everywhere with you?"
"This isn't a creature," Derek said. "She's a nose with 4 paws. You might want to check the bottom of your left shoe."
He pointed to Chewie, who was sniffing the receptionist's left shoe like it was a 5-course meal.
"I'm guessing you stepped in something on your way to work this morning."
The receptionist grimaced. "Right this way." She turned and led us deeper into the building. We followed her to the sunny corner office, which belonged to Roxanne Hartley, owner and president of Hartley Cosmetics. Before the receptionist left, she looked me over, not so subtly assessing me. I did the same. She appeared to be around 25, the same age as me. I wondered if she had some other career she was passionate about and was only working as a receptionist for the time being while she looked for other work. Something about the way she held her mouth let it slip that the poor girl was actually envious of me, maybe wondering what I had done to get the kind of job where I went to appointments with presidents of companies. I gave her a one-shoulder shrug with an eyebrow raise as if to say, "I'm only a temp, and next week I might be answering phones just like you." She turned away with her nose in the air and left. Derek shook Roxanne Hartley's hand and introduced both of us. We were using our regular names and no cover story. Roxanne barely acknowledged me before she knelt down to pet Chewie, who was overjoyed to have a new person to sniff. It took a few minutes to get everyone settled into chairs around the room's elegant glass-topped desk. Roxanne had closed her office door so the beagle could wander around freely off her leash. Chewie delighted in inspecting all of the room's potted plants. Smiling as she watched the dog sniff trails through the room, Roxanne said, "Your pooch must do a great job helping you solve cases." Derek answered,
"She helps me with absolutely everything, especially finishing my meals."
"I hear beagles make wonderful family pets," she said. "Now what can I help you two with? Have there been any new developments in the robbery investigation? Detectives Sloan and Clark wouldn't tell me anything, but I'm not an idiot. I'm sure you're here because someone said something about me. Was it Mitzi? She was always jealous of my friendship with Brock."
Derek leaned forward in his chair and looked beyond Roxanne at the view from the windows. We could see boats of all sizes sailing by. I expected him to make a comment about the view, but he settled back again and dove right into our main mission.
"Miss Hartley, when was the last time you saw Brock Kensington?"
Roxanne didn't seem surprised by his directness.
"At the funeral,"
she said.
"The last time you saw him alive?"
She blinked innocently.
"Like I told your two colleagues from the Norfolk Police Department, before he died, I hadn't seen Brock socially for over a year."
"How about privately?"
Roxanne's cheeks flushed to match her lips. She reminded me of a young pop singer with her glowing dark skin and round face, her soft features highlighted with artfully applied makeup. Hartley Cosmetics made beauty products for women of all colors, but their specialty was their diverse range of shades for darker skin tones. Roxanne Hartley's lipstick was a rich plum that looked custom-made to flatter her features. She spoke mechanically.
"Mr. Diamond, I have not seen Brock Kensington, either socially or privately, in over a year."
"Why is that? Did he dump you?"
She pushed her chair back and stood. She turned to be in profile to us and used her hands to pull in her tunic-style dress above and below her stomach. She had a baby bump.
"I'm 6 months along," Roxanne said. Despite what his ditzy lush of a wife may be spreading around, I broke it off with Brock Kensington a year ago when I decided I wanted to have a baby.
He's not the father?
Derek asked. She scoffed. Of course not. The donor is anonymous, and that's how I want it. This baby is entirely mine. The room was silent for a moment, the only sound being the soft hum of the air conditioner. As the only other woman present, I felt an obligation to say something. Congratulations, I said warmly. Do you have a name picked out yet? Roxanne released her tunic, took her seat again, and gave me a friendly smile. Lux, she said. That name is perfect, whether it's a boy or a girl. Derek's right eye twitched. He jumped into the next question.
Where were you on April 5th at 8 o'clock?
At my fertility clinic. I was there from 6 o'clock until 8:30.
This fertility clinic of yours keeps strange hours,
he said. They cater to busy professionals, she said. I had a consultation and some tests, then a massage and a hot stone treatment, and then another consultation. Derek raised his eyebrows.
What a convenient, ironclad alibi.
The friendly expression dropped off Roxanne's face. You idiots. It wasn't me, okay? I've actually been trying to help you people this whole time.
You've been helping?
Derek glanced over at me.
Did you know about this?
I didn't know what to say, so I made a squeaking noise and shrugged. Roxanne continued. I called in an anonymous tip to whoever was in charge of the case, but your people can't do anything. She was getting worked up, talking faster. I keep telling you people where to look, but the best thing you can come up with is to do nothing for months. Now you take the word of that pathetic drunk of a wife who doesn't even do anything. And you all come tromping in here to harass a hard-working businesswoman? People like you are exactly what's wrong with this world. Derek sat back in his chair and casually leaned over to the side to pet his dog. She'd probably come over to investigate the source of the squeaking sound I'd made.
I hear you, Miss Hartley,
he said, nodding.
And I apologize for how you've been treated. But I'm not with the police. Those people are not my people, because I'm my own person. Independent like you.
Okay, she said, her nostrils flaring while the rest of her face remained motionless. He continued.
I'm new to this case as of 3 days ago, so let's both give each other the benefit of the doubt. How about you tell me about these other leads I should be following up on?
She crossed her arms and then uncrossed them with an angry huff. At first, I thought Mitzi did it. I thought she killed him. But in the last 2 months, I've been hearing some other things that make me wonder. Rumors? Roxanne glanced over at me and narrowed her large brown eyes. I'm not a backstabber, she said. I don't gossip, and I don't tolerate rumors. Nobody needs a backstabber. The way she kept saying backstabber sent a chill up my spine. Brock Kensington had not been stabbed in the back, but he had been struck on the head from behind.
We're nothing if not discreet,
Derek said reassuringly.
Please help us. Nobody will know you were spreading rumors, and you'll sleep easier tonight knowing you did the right thing.
Roxanne took in a big breath and sighed heavily. Brock was not the perfect husband and father he pretended to be. High achievers are special people who need special treatment. When you work in a high-pressure job, you need a way to let off steam.
And how did Brock do that?
Derek leaned over, picked up Chewie, and placed her on his lap.
I'm guessing it wasn't playing golf or training a new dog. Did he have a girlfriend? A side girl?
I shuddered as the phrase side girl ricocheted through my head. What an ugly term. Comparing a human being to a side salad or extra order of fries. Roxanne turned to watch the boats on the water outside. No side girl. He learned his lesson with me. I broke his heart, you know. He didn't want to get into another mess with a girlfriend. Rumor is he went the professional route.
A hooker,
Derek said. Roxanne turned back to face us, wincing. Don't bother asking me which agency because I don't know. The whole thing is disgusting.
Who would know which agency? Did he have a favorite girl?
Roxanne turned to her computer and wiggled her mouse to wake up the monitor.
You're the detective, she said vaguely. Can't you check his credit card records or something like that?
He probably took certain precautions to prevent his wife from finding out.
Okay then, she said nonchalantly. I guess you've got your work cut out for you.
Derek turned to me and gave me an eyebrow raise, as if to warn me he was about to do something unconventional. And he did. He picked up his dog and set her on Roxanne's desk.
Chewy, beg,
he said.
Not me, the nice lady. Look at her and beg.
Roxanne squealed and rolled back from the desk. The dog sat back on her haunches obediently and lifted her front paws while she whimpered. At Derek's urging, she continued to beg, tilting her head from side to side as she waved her front paws and vocalized. Roxanne looked like she was wavering on the edge of ordering security to throw us out. After a full minute of Chewy's persistent and adorable begging, her posture finally relaxed and she gave in.
Talk to Max, she said. Max Harris at Avamar International. He's the one who is pressuring Brock to cool it with the side girls.
Derek asked,
Is Max also a very good friend of yours?
Brock and Max went to college with my older brother, she said. The three of them were the best of friends, and all of them helped me out considerably with my career. Of course, I do try to downplay that fact since they're men.
I nodded as I accessed my memory of Roxanne's brother. Roland Hartley was 10 years older than Roxanne and currently worked at a construction company in Texas. Meanwhile, Derek had retrieved a dog biscuit from a pocket and was feeding it to Chewy, who wagged her tail with enough excitement to send the papers on Roxanne's desk flying to the floor.
I always try to do the right things,
Roxanne said as she crouched down to pick up the fallen papers.
I broke it off with Brock when I found out about the fights he had with his wife. One time, I saw this whole trail of purple bruises all over his back. He said it was from her punching him. She's little but mean. Watch your back around Mitzi Kensington.
That's why I've got my assistant, Derek said. She's always watching my back.
He nodded as he picked up his dog and lifted her back down to the ground.
Now there's dog fur all over my desk, Roxanne said bitterly. Please leave now. Just go.
Thank you for your time,
he said, setting his business card on her desk.
We'll show ourselves out.
He moved toward the door quickly. I jumped up and ran to keep up with him. We stopped at the reception desk, where Derek spoke in a hushed voice to the receptionist.
We'd love to send your boss a token of our appreciation. I have connections with some shoe designers. Do you happen to know what size shoe your boss wears?
The brunette wrinkled her nose.
Not really. Maybe a 7 or 8?
How about heels? Does she wear stilettos?
She doesn't go higher than a 1-inch heel,
the receptionist said.
But lately it's been flats only.
Derek gave her a sly smile.
Has she been packing on the pounds lately?
The receptionist smirked.
At least 30 pounds, and she eats everything people leave in the break room, whether it's hers or not. She mostly wears sneakers and yoga pants when she doesn't have meetings.
Her expression brightened.
If you're looking for a good gift, you could send her yoga stuff.
Derek winked at the receptionist.
And what's your favorite color, Colette? Is it purple?
The receptionist nodded. He took a business card, said goodbye, and opened the door to the hallway without so much as a glance back at me. A minute later, we were stepping into the elevator. He picked up the beagle and held her with one arm. A courier in bicycle shorts joined us and pressed the lobby button.
That was productive, I said softly. If Roxanne didn't wear stilettos and she had switched to flats since the pregnancy, it seemed unlikely she was the person who left the footprints at the Kensington residence. Plus, there was the matter of her ironclad alibi. My head buzzed with all this new information. If Brock's business colleague had been angry at him for his behavior with a prostitute, that gave us not just one new suspect, but two: Max Harris and this mystery woman. I looked to Derek for a reaction. Did he agree that the meeting had been productive?
Stupid name,
Derek muttered under his breath. I glanced over at the bike courier riding in the elevator with us. He was staring at his phone, seemingly oblivious to our existence. Do you mean Max Harris? I asked. He could be related to the daughter's boyfriend, Chad Harris. It's a fairly common name, Harris, but I wouldn't say it's stupid.
Lux,
Derek spat out.
I meant Lux is a stupid name. That megalomaniacal woman is going to name her baby after an Instagram filter.
Megalomaniacal? I had never heard that word spoken by a regular person. Derek Diamond, detective extraordinaire, had a rich vocabulary. I suppressed a smirk. It could be worse. I hear Kale is also a popular name this year. Derek shook his head.
Abby, don't mess with me just because I've been around a while. Nobody on God's green earth is naming their baby after a type of salad.
The courier put away his phone, cleared his throat, and adjusted the rise of his bicycle shorts.
My sister's naming one of her twins Kale.
The courier volunteered. Derek frowned at him.
Young man, how many siblings do you have?
Just one, the guy answered.
Well, it must be nice to be the smartest person in your family.
The elevator dinged, opened on the lobby, and Derek strode out. The courier turned to me and said,
It's okay. Sometimes my grandpa doesn't take his medication, and he gets cranky like that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Congratulations on the twins. Growing up, I always wanted a brother or sister. The courier took off his glasses and looked at me like he desperately wanted to say something that would change my entire life. I didn't stick around to hear what it was. My boss and I had murder suspects to interview. Chapter 8, 11:37 a.m. Offices of Avamar International Shipping. Max Harris had been out of town on company business the night Brock Kensington was killed. The detectives had followed standard procedure for canvassing close friends and business contacts, and Max was both of those things. He'd been in China taking meetings when he had gotten the bad news, and he returned a few days earlier than planned. He was a round man with a jowly face and curly brown hair. We researched Max in the car right after leaving Hartley Cosmetics. When Derek showed me his photo, I immediately recognized him as the portly friend in the boat christening photos on the walls of Brock Kensington's home office. We easily confirmed that his son was Chad Harris, Megan's boyfriend. We also discovered, thanks to what Derek described as his cheap and dirty detective work, that Max Harris wasn't exactly the father of the year. Armed with that knowledge as currency, we practically barged into the man's office. Avamar's chief financial officer was eating an early lunch at his desk when we walked into his office with Chewie in tow. He set half a burrito on a plate where it leaked brown sauce and meat chunks. Chewie smacked her lips noisily but behaved herself.
They say you shouldn't eat at your desk,
Max said around a mouthful.
But I'm always at my desk, and as you can see, diets don't agree with my system. Thank you for squeezing us in,
Derek said. Max snorted.
It's hard to say no when people show up and there's only one way out of your office.
He grabbed a mitt full of napkins and mopped his mouth and forehead. Either Max was nervous about us coming to see him, or he had very spicy seasoning in his burrito. I took a seat in the visitor's chair across from his desk, moving slowly so I could lean forward and get a good whiff of his half-eaten burrito. I picked up the tang of hot sauce. I didn't have as many scent receptors as the Beagle member of our team, but my nose had a little talent for cheap and dirty detective work.
Derek took a seat next to me and instructed Chewie to lie down at his feet. She smacked her lips again. Derek gave her a stern look and she settled down with her chin on her paws. Max said,
"My secretary told me you were some sort of detectives. I don't know why Mitzi and Megan have gone to so much trouble. I told them I was on the case."
Mitzi and Megan? Did Max Harris think they were the ones who hired Derek? I turned to my boss to watch for a reaction. His brown eyes and steely expression revealed nothing. Derek only nodded and said to the man,
"Speaking of which, what do you have so far?"
Clever. He was fishing for information, pretending to know more than he did. Max replied,
"Just scraps of papers. I gathered up all the post-it notes Brock had around the office. I'm sure the new combination's written on one of them."
"For the antique safe," Derek said, nodding. So, Mitzi and Megan were actively seeking the combination for Brock's home office safe for some reason. Max grabbed the burrito and took a huge bite, his jowls wagging. Derek said,
"That's good news about the combination, but we're actually here today about a different matter."
He leaned back, looking casual.
"I need to get hold of that girl."
"Girl?" Max rubbed his mouth with the napkins.
"What girl?"
A bead of sweat dripped down the side of his forehead.
"The one you told Brock Kensington to stop seeing?"
Max bit into the burrito again and mumbled around the food.
"What makes you think there was a girl?"
Derek rubbed his chin and turned to me.
"Abby, remember those parking tickets Max acquired recently? Did you notice any sort of pattern to them?"
I swallowed hard. On the drive here, he had coached me on what to say. I had easily memorized the words, "Why, yes, Derek. All the parking tickets were within 3 blocks of the city's most notorious escort establishment. It's almost as though Mr. Harris discovered what Mr. Kensington was up to because he was doing the same thing himself." Instead of saying the prepared lines, I stammered, "Pattern?" Without missing a beat, Derek turned to Max and said,
"She can't tell me what she said in the car because she's disgusted. Absolutely disgusted."
My cheeks burned. I nodded down, my eyes on the taupe carpet.
"Look at her,"
Derek said, picking up steam.
"Max, she can't even look you in the eyes. You disgust her with your womanizing ways." "Sorry,"
Max said, sounding like a small child being scolded.
"I'm a bad boy." "That's between you and your deity,"
Derek said.
"Now give me the name of the girl your friend Brock was involved with. One name, and then I'm gone. You'll never see me again."
Max wiped his forehead with the napkins.
"I can't remember her name,"
he said.
"Tell me what you do know."
Max took in a deep breath and wheezed it out noisily.
"You won't tell anyone?" "I won't tell your wife or son," Derek said. "You can still be a big hero in your son Chad's eyes." "Too late for that,"
Max said glumly.
"My son hasn't looked up to me since he was 5. He latches onto anyone but me. I swear he only started dating that sickly gerbil Megan so he could get himself into a new family. Chad loves the Kensingtons. He says they're everything our family isn't." "Did Chad have a close relationship with Brock?" "He loved both Mitzi and Brock. Idolized them. They were the family his mother and I could never be."
He shook his head.
"It's not his mother's fault. She never was strong, mentally. She couldn't handle life, and unfortunately, not a troubled boy like Chad." "Troubled?"
Derek tipped his head to the side.
"Is there a problem with Chad? Maybe some sealed juvenile records?" "No,"
Max said a little too quickly.
No, nothing like that, no."
Yes, I thought, exactly like that. Derek pressed on.
"How about Megan? What was that thing you called her?"
He turned to me.
"What did he call her? A mouse?"
A sickly gerbil, I said. Derek turned back to Max.
Why'd you call Megan a sickly gerbil?
Max shrugged.
You've seen her face. She's got those beady little eyes.
He shuddered.
I hope my future grandchildren don't get the gerbil genes. If they took after Brock, it wouldn't be so bad. He had good genes. How are you dealing with the loss of your old friend?
Max used his thick thumb to wipe up the dribbles of sauce on his burrito plate.
Life goes on,
he said.
Is that mole poblano sauce?
Derek asked.
The kind with chocolate?
Chocolate, Max said slowly.
You know, I think I just remembered the girl's name.
He reached for a notepad and tore off a sheet of paper. He sniffed as he began writing.
My life is a mess,
he said glumly.
It's not too late,
Derek said.
People are bad umpires when it comes to their own lives, calling things finished long before it's truly over. If you've got breath left in your body, it's not too late.
Max finished writing down the name of the girl and pushed the paper across the table toward us.
You don't know me,
Max said indignantly, a sudden flash of anger showing on his face.
You can pull up my tax records, my credit cards, even my internet search history, and you still won't know me. A man is not his record.
Derek took the paper, folded it without looking, and tucked it into his pocket. He stood and tugged on Chewy's leash. Max called after us,
A man is not his record.
We left the office. We were waiting for the elevator to leave Avamar when Derek handed me Chewy's leash.
Back in a flash,
he said. He ducked his head back into the reception for Avamar and spoke to the receptionist for a moment. He returned at the same time the elevator arrived and stepped in with a big smile on his face. We were alone in the elevator, which had mirrored walls reflecting his sunny grin to infinity. Sending another thank you gift? I asked.
No, but I figured out where we're going for lunch,
he said.
Do you like Mexican food?
Sure. Are we visiting Max's favorite takeout place to get more information about him?
Abby, sometimes a burrito is just a burrito.
He pulled the paper Max had given him from his pocket and showed it to me.
Do you see how talking about the mole sauce triggered his memory?
The girl's first name was Coco. You said chocolate, which made him think of Coco, and then Coco. I guess we meet with her next? I rubbed my hands together. This is getting exciting. A hooker named Coco definitely wears stiletto heels. She could have killed Brock and made it look like a burglary.
She's also the first associate of the victims that the police haven't gotten to first. We might be on to something. This could be our big break. Or a dead end. Big breaks and dead ends feel exactly the same going in.
And that's why I'm so indecisive, I thought. Big breaks and dead ends look so similar. You don't know something's a trap until you wander into it. The elevator opened on the lobby floor. Derek took out his phone and started making a call as soon as we stepped outside onto the sunny sidewalk in downtown Norfolk. He pulled the receiver away from his mouth and said to me,
Be our Sherpa. Take us to the nearest Mexican place. I already forgot the name the receptionist told me.
I guessed it was the burrito place a block away, so I led the way while he talked on the phone. He didn't say much, but I gathered he was trying to get the full version of a medical report that had been referenced but not included in our copy of the police homicide files. We arrived at the restaurant, which was packed with a lunch crowd. He stayed on the phone outside and sent me in to get takeout using the same corporate credit card I'd taken shopping. I got him the same burrito Max had been eating and a taco salad for myself. Rather than eat in the car, we sat on a bench in a tiny park across the street. Chewy ate her lunch at the same time, a paper plate of dog food purchased from a nearby pet store.
It's good for the whole pack to eat at the same time,
Derek said.
A shared meal creates a bond.
I reached down and patted Chewy on her black saddle. I'm honored to be a part of Chewy's pack this week.
When we'd finished eating, Derek said,
"That's it for field work today. Do you mind doing some work from home? I'm going on a personal call this afternoon, but if you've got access to a computer, you could type up a summary of today's 2 interviews. I don't expect it to be verbatim, but as long as you get something started, I can fill in the rest."
"I can do that," I said. "I have a clunky old laptop at home. Do you want me to type up the visit to the hair salon and our tour of the Kensington home as well?" He looked surprised by my industriousness.
"If you don't mind,"
he said. By 4:30, I'd finished the reports and proofread them. Since I was still on the payroll until 5 o'clock, I pulled up a search engine and started some research into gyroscopic exercise equipment. From what I saw, it looked like a great diet and fitness invention. You could get a workout and lose your stomach contents at the same time. Derek phoned at 4:45 p.m.
"I got the full medical examiner's report,"
he said excitedly. "What about Coco? Did you track her down?"
"Yes, but listen to this. The victim's corpse had dried blood in his hair and on the back of his neck, but not a single fresh drop on the clothing he was found in."
He changed his clothes after he was hit, before he was strangled with his belt?
"That's a distinct possibility. Also, he had a waxy peach-colored substance inside his nostrils."
"Drugs?" Derek chuckled on the other end of the call.
"I don't think so. Not unless people are snorting makeup. The ME suggested it was lipstick."
"Mitzi Kensington wears peach-colored lipstick, or at least she was wearing it the first time we showed up at her house."
"Have you ever kissed a boy so hard your lipstick went up inside his nose?"
The memory of the night I met Owen flashed into my brain so vividly it took my breath away. Derek said,
"I take it from your silence that you either have or you think it's possible."
"It's possible, but Mitzi and her daughter had been out of town for 2 days." I tapped my fingers on the new table, thinking. Then again, her lipstick might have gotten up in there if she attempted to resuscitate him that night. I heard papers rustle.
"The homicide report doesn't say she did, but it doesn't say she didn't."
"Hang on, I've got an idea." I quickly pulled up Megan Kensington's Instagram account and looked for the photos they had posted from the plane. I described the photos to Derek, ending with, "Mitzi's lipstick that day was a rosy pink, but Megan was wearing a peach shade. They have the same coloring, so they probably share makeup."
"Does a woman change her lipstick shade during the day?"
"Only if she changes her clothes, or if she's switching from day to night." I quoted something I'd read in a woman's magazine. "A woman's lipstick should get darker and brighter after the sun goes down because there's less light around."
So, Megan was wearing peach lipstick, but the reports state she didn't even touch her body, let alone attempt resuscitation.
I said.
Derek agreed.
"That is puzzling," I said. "Between that and the Kensington women trying to find the combination for the old safe, it kind of makes you wonder what they're hiding."
"They're hiding something, all right."
There was the sound of papers rustling again.
"It's nearly 5 o'clock. I should let you go. Get a good night's sleep, 'cause tomorrow's another full day."
"Are we meeting the call girl?"
"You sound excited,"
he said with a chuckle.
"Yes, we are."
Chapter 9. Thursday, 11:22 a.m. Shonda's nail shop. "So what if I was hooking up with Megan's dad?" The bored-looking escort known as Coco LaBelle barely glanced up at us before she turned her attention back to the petite woman kneeling at her feet. "I want the toenails rounded, not square," she said. "I want my feet to look pretty, like hands." "Pretty," the manicurist said. "Pretty feet, yes. Blue?" Derek glanced around the nail shop with obvious discomfort. Chewie seemed overwhelmed by the chemicals in the air and had her nose tucked tightly against Derek's pant leg. Derek said,
"Coco, if you're busy, we'd be happy to meet with you some other time."
He wrinkled his nose.
"Or some other place."
I'm busy later, the girl said. Unless you pay my premium rates, you don't get access to me at my premium time. She flashed him a hustler smile, equal parts devil and angel. Maybe you'd be interested in that level of quality time? Coco was light-skinned black and had the same large doe-like eyes as Roxanne Hartley. If Brock Kensington had a type, I was looking at her, and she was the opposite of his pale, beady-eyed wife. Coco wore minimal makeup and a brown shade of lipstick. If she ever wore pale, peach-hued lipstick, it would be a dramatic look, but not in a good way. Derek coughed and cleared his throat.
Right now is the best time for us. May I ask what size your feet are?
The escort giggled and pulled 1 foot away from the manicurist. She waved her foot at Derek playfully.
You've got a foot fetish, just like Tarantino.
What size?
He repeated.
5.5,
she said. Size 5.5? Yeah, right. If I'd been sipping a drink, I would have spat it out. Coco LaBelle's feet hadn't been a size 5.5 since she had been 5.5. Derek heard my mild snort and shot a look my way.
Yes, Abby. Did you have something to contribute?
I took off my shoe and gave Coco LaBelle a hustler smile of my own. May I? Coco held out her hand, palm up, requesting payment. Derek dropped more bills into her hand, doubling the amount we were paying for her not-so-premium mid-afternoon time.
Go ahead with the shoe,
Coco said to me nonchalantly.
I can play Cinderella if that's what you two lovebirds are into.
I slipped my own shoe onto her foot. It was a perfect fit. I pulled the shoe off again and showed the inner stamp with the size to Derek. He let out a low whistle that elicited a single bark from Chewy.
That's nowhere near a 7, let alone 5,
he said. Exactly, I said. Derek's eyes unfocused.
This young woman wasn't the one who left the shoe prints at the house, not unless she squeezed into 2 small shoes.
I don't know about her, but I couldn't wear a size 7 if my life depended on it. I turned to Coco. Tall girl problems, right? Coco sighed and said, I didn't mean to lie about something as silly as my shoe size. I used to do phone sex. Selling fantasies gets you out of the habit of telling the truth. She put her hand on the manicurist's shoulder.
Honey, would you mind giving us a moment of privacy?
The manicurist stood and put the cap on the bottle of sparkly blue nail polish before leaving us. The only other people in the nail salon were another worker and an elderly woman near the front window. The 2 of them were carrying on their own conversation about a TV show. Coco gave us a more serious look and said,
Let's start over. I'm not really a brainless bimbo. I just play one for student loan money.
I gave her a friendly smile. We have 2 things in common. Her posture in the salon's reclining chair relaxed significantly. I quickly added, not playing a brainless bimbo. I meant the student loan thing. Derek's gaze focused again on Coco and he asked,
Why did you refer to Brock as Megan's father? Are you friends with Megan Kensington, part of her social group?
Coco's lips scrunched up like she'd eaten something bitter.
Megan and I were never what you'd call friends. We went to the same school for a while when we were younger, back when my parents could pay the private school tuition, before everything went bust for my family.
Derek gave her a sympathetic head shake.
It's a crying shame what's happening to this once great country.
The land of opportunity, she said with irony. But I suppose it could be worse. At least I've got a few regulars who aren't so bad.
Brock Kensington was one of those regulars?
He was pretty new, but I was winning him over with my many charms. Such a shame what happened to him. Did you hear? Someone broke into his house and killed him.
Derek turned to make eye contact with me and blinked once, slowly. It seemed to be his manly version of an eye roll. Either Coco was on drugs or she actually was the bimbo she played. Derek told her we were investigating some discrepancies with a homicide case when we first introduced ourselves. What happened to Brock was such a shame, I said to Coco, speaking slowly. Have you got any ideas about who might have killed him? She wrinkled her forehead for a moment before answering. Probably his wife. She had him trapped in that marriage, but she was crazy, always starting fights with him. She actually hit him a few times. Can you believe that? Wow, I said. She sounds crazy. Are you sure she was the one starting the fights? Coco nodded vehemently. She told him she'd destroy his career if he tried to leave her. Poor Brock was very unhappy. He used to strap himself into this funny contraption. It looked ridiculous. He'd ask me to strap him in and he'd hang upside down. He loved hanging like that, pretending he was Batman. Derek had a faraway look again. He didn't say anything about this new accusation of Mitzi being the abusive spouse. Since we were paying for Coco's time, I went ahead and said, If you've seen the gyroscope, I guess you've been to the Kensington residence. Coco covered her mouth with her hand and glanced around furtively. We're not supposed to go to their houses, but he was a very busy man. She dropped her hand from her mouth and sat up straight in the treatment lounger. You want to hear something really scary? Derek's eyes remained glazed over. Sure, I said on his behalf. I was so lucky I didn't get killed that day too, Coco said. I was supposed to meet Brock at his house to help him relax before his horrible wife and snooty daughter got back from spending his money. She held her hand to her chest. I could have been killed by that burglar, but then Brock called and canceled at the last minute, so I didn't go. Why did he cancel? I asked. He said he was sick. I was already on my way over in an Uber. I tried to call him and tell him I'd bring over some chicken soup and make him feel better, but he wasn't picking up his phone. Did he send you a text to cancel? I asked. And are you sure this was the same day he was killed? She nodded. I'm pretty sure it was that day. I'm so sad I didn't get to talk to him one last time, but maybe it was for the best. What time did he call? I don't know the exact time. He called the agency instead of my phone, and my battery was dead for a while. I elbowed Derek subtly. I was out of questions and in over my head. Derek shuffled his feet and blinked at me before smiling at Coco. Miss, do you remember where you went after Brock canceled your session? I hope this information won't cost extra because we need some cash for lunch. Coco gave him a genuine laugh. I knew it was real because it was somewhat less than a man's fantasy of a laugh. She said, I came right back to the house and met with another client at 6 o'clock. Another girl was with me, and she would have done this guy by herself, but then I was available to join in the fun. She frowned. I feel so bad that I was having fun while Brock was dying. At least you have a solid alibi, I said cheerfully. She gave me a confused look. Why would I need an alibi? I didn't do anything. It's only guilty people who need alibis. She rubbed her upper arms. I hope they catch the bastard who did this. Derek said, I'm sure the Kensington family will rest easier once the matter's been settled. Coco gave us a sneering look. How's Megan doing? Have you seen her lately? I hear she got puffy in the face, like her mother. She snorted. Serves her right for being such a spoiled little rich brat. I said, sounds like you and Megan have a lot of history. Did she do something to you back when you went to school together? No way. Coco gave an indignant head bob. And she better not do anything to me or I'll find a way to get even with her. Like sleeping with her father? Coco kept bobbing her head.
Yeah, something like that.
Did you ever bump into Megan when you were at the Kensington house?
No, but I went into her room a few times. There's nothing illegal about that. I was a guest in the house.
She reached up with both hands and touched her earrings, which appeared to be diamonds. Big ones. Derek was watching me but not interrupting. He gave the smallest nod like he was telling me to keep going. Did you ever borrow Megan's things? I asked. Coco fiddled with the earrings again, then crossed her arms.
She wouldn't notice if I did, so who cares? Why are you asking? Who are you anyway?
I'm just a girl who's trying to do her job. That seemed to trigger something in Coco. With a sigh, she started to unclasp the diamond earrings.
Here. They're too heavy for my ears anyway. I have very sensitive lobes.
She reached out and dropped the earrings into my hand. Trying to mask my revulsion, I said, "Thanks. Thank you for your cooperation today." Derek nodded curtly and tugged on Chewy's leash.
Thank you for everything. We'll be sure to return Megan Kensington's borrowed property to her.
I'll deny everything,
Coco said, turning to pick up an old-fashioned bell from her tray, which she rang to summon her manicurist. Derek paused to hand a few bills to the manicurist, thanked her for her patience, and led the way out of the salon. When we got to the car, he handed me an envelope.
Dump those earrings in here.
I did so while making gagging sounds. Pricey diamonds or not, the prostitute had dumped her stinky ear gunk right into my hand. I couldn't get the vial of hand sanitizer out of my purse fast enough.
Well?
Derek fastened his seatbelt and gave Chewy a dog treat.
What are your thoughts on Coco LaBelle? I found your written reports to be very insightful. You've got a good sense for judging character.
She's not exactly a criminal mastermind, I said. All I did was look at her earrings, and she spontaneously confessed and handed them over. If she was guilty of murder, she'd probably pay more attention to things like who she was talking to and why. She probably forgot you were a detective a minute after you told her.
Any wild theories about who did murder Brock Kensington?
I turned the key and started the rental car's engine to get the air conditioning running. After a minute of thinking, I answered, he canceled his 5 o'clock house call for a reason. Maybe he found a new girl, a better girl.
Derek said. A more exciting girl who killed him. Someone completely new.
I stared straight ahead at the trunk of the tree we were parked under. After a moment, I asked, are we at a dead end?
Yes,
he said.
Or maybe not.
I feel like we're missing something that's going to seem really obvious in retrospect. He nodded slowly.
What we really need is somewhere quiet to review everything.
Like your hotel room. I can drive us there. Which one are you staying at? He swished his mouth from side to side.
Who's at your apartment right now?
Hard to say, but it's probably a disaster.
Do you have any food there?
That depends on your definition of food. How do you feel about frozen pizza?
We can order in.
Okay. I put the car in gear and began driving toward my apartment.
Chewy doesn't like the hotel room, he said. She stares at the crack under the door and I can't relax if she's agitated. Plus, you know what it's like being on the road. There's nothing more soulless than a hotel room.
I wouldn't know. I've been on a few trips for track meets, but there were always at least 4 people to a room. It was hard to even see the room around all the stuff.
You're smiling, Derek said. Going to track meets was the last time you were happy.
What? He said.
You were happy at track meets and now you're not.
I shot him a dirty look. Does anyone ever call you on your crappy assumptions about people?
No,
he said. We drove the rest of the way to my apartment in silence while I told him off inside my head. Chapter 10, 12:45 p.m., my apartment. Once inside the apartment, our Beagle assistant inspected all the rooms before settling on the sofa. She chose the spot on the far right cushion, the one that was also my favorite seat. I took this to mean she liked me, or at least my scent. Owen wasn't there, but the presence of his shoes, clothes, and empty beer bottles made it wildly clear to my detective boss that I had a live-in boyfriend.
"What's the story here?"
Derek pointed to the expensive new table that Owen had bought as a bribe to get back into my life. "No story," I said coolly. I was still annoyed at him for what he had said on the drive over about my happiness, or lack thereof.
"Legally Blonde, you can't afford this table."
"Then give me a raise," I said. "Coffee?" I turned my back to him and rummaged for coffee-making supplies. We hadn't eaten lunch yet, but coffee would keep me going for a bit.
"I have to visit the little boy's room first," he said, "if you don't mind."
Ordinarily, I don't let people in my apartment use the washroom, but for you, I'll make an exception. Derek clapped his hands.
"There she is. There's the real Abby Silver. And it only took 3.5 days and a visit to her apartment to bring her out."
He turned to Chewy.
"She's sarcastic, too. I knew it. There's always a pause before she speaks, like she's saying something for the audience in her head first."
I stared at him, stunned by his accuracy. He just loves nailing people on their faults. At least I don't spew out every thought in my head like it's divine wisdom.
"Ha! Good one."
He turned and started toward the bathroom, muttering,
2 points for Abby, who apparently has a spine after all."
I looked over at Chewy, who sneezed once before resting her chin back on her white paw. While Derek used the washroom, I made coffee and put in a furtive call to my best friend, Kiko. Kiko said, "He's in your apartment right now?" She sounded incredulous, and I could picture her tiny, delicate mouth forming a shocked O. "The dog's on my sofa, and he's in the bathroom," I said. "Oh, this is getting weird, Abby. Too weird. You need to call the agency and get yourself taken off this one, or at least get paid more." "I don't need a lecture, Kiko. I'm just checking in with you in case, something happens to me." "Oh, something has already happened. The crazy old man has you lying and chasing around after murderers. Does he have a gun? I bet he does. How bad is he?" "Not so bad." Now I felt guilty for exaggerating my complaints to Kiko. And, unlike your grandfather, he hasn't said a single racist thing. "Old people aren't any more racist than anyone else," she said. "They're just more honest. And I swear my grandpa says that stuff just to be funny." She made bubble-popping sounds with her mouth. "Can I come over and help? I'm so bored here. I'm collating today." Collating. Do you know how tedious collating is? Don't they have fancy photocopiers to do all that for you? Kiko sighed. "I'd pay you to let me come over there to your place." "I don't even know what we're doing. He says he wants to review all the case files, whatever that entails." "Oh, you should get out that big dry erase whiteboard we use to play Big Pictionary. You can draw boxes and lines like they do in the movies." "Not a bad idea." I held the phone to my ear with my shoulder as I went to the coat closet. I pushed storage boxes out of the way so I could get at the large whiteboard. "Got it," I said. "Really? You're going to make a murder board?" "I need to. Everything's in my head in linear order, so I bet making a nonlinear chart would help my brain." She made more bubble-popping noises on the other end of the phone call. "Who did you meet with today?" "You know I can't tell you who, but I can give you a cheap and dirty hint. She does all her work lying down, if you know what I mean." I grunted as I pulled out the board's tripod stand. "That's a good clue," my best friend said. I could hear her typing rapidly. "If you're busy with work, I'll let you go." "What's the hooker's name? I want to see what she looks like." "I can't tell you that. Confidentiality and whatnot." "Abby,
I need to tell you something. Promise you won't be mad.
She didn't wait for me to answer before she said,
I know you're working on the Kensington burglary, that unsolved murder.
I nearly dropped the board. Down the hallway, the toilet flushed. Derek would be coming out any minute. I hissed into the phone. Kiko, don't mess around. How do you know? I never told you one single name. She made a delighted noise.
I didn't know for sure, not until you got mad. It's called phishing. You should try it sometime, Watson.
Please, just forget everything I told you. I shouldn't have said anything.
But I can help, she said brightly. You always tease me about accepting friend requests from anyone who asks. Well, it turns out I'm friends with someone who knows both Megan and Chad, and I've been looking at random photos of them all day today.
I sighed. Kiko had more curiosity than a dozen cats, and I'd been stupid to mention anything to her. Anything suspicious?
That depends, she said. Was the hooker you met today Asian?
I can't discuss that. Kiko, please forget about this whole thing. Forget I blabbed.
Was she black?
What are you getting at? Did you find something? Just spit it out.
Okay, Kiko said. Chad and Megan were at a big weekend party back in March, a week before the homicide. It started out Friday as a girl-guy combination party, but then the second night, the guys went out for the whole bachelor party thing, and Chad really enjoyed the strippers, or at least they enjoyed him. There were two girls who were all over him in every photo.
She typed something on her side.
These two dum-dums actually tagged themselves in the pictures. I'm sure their families are so proud. Lucy Liu and Coco LaBelle. Is one of them involved in the case?
On the whiteboard, I circled Coco's name with a blue dry erase pen and drew a line connecting Brock Kensington's escort with his daughter and her boyfriend. No comment, I said, but could you send me the pictures? She squealed.
This is so exciting!
You're insane.
You're welcome.
I gotta go, I whispered. He's coming out of the bathroom. Send the pictures, okay? My phone buzzed.
Already sent, Kiko said. Pop, pop.
Pop, pop, I replied, which was our shorthand for goodbye, I love you, hello, and anything else that didn't need to be spelled out between friends. I tucked the phone into my pocket and continued writing more names on the whiteboard. The chart was so engrossing, I barely noticed Derek return. He grabbed a cup of coffee and got busy as well, spreading files and photos across the table. We discussed the interviews we had done together, as well as the notes from the police and the new medical examiner's report. I was surprised by just how much ground we had covered in just a few days. On Monday, I had gone undercover with Mitzi's hairdresser at Salon Ronaldo. Thanks to listening in on my stylist Richie, I'd learned that Brock Kensington had violent tendencies and that even Mitzi's stylist suspected something was fishy with the burglary-turned-homicide. On Tuesday, we'd posed as film location scouts and gotten access to the Kensington home. We'd met Mitzi, as well as her daughter Megan and Megan's boyfriend Chad. Derek snuck off and located Mitzi's grass-stained shoes. We returned later that night with the police who had a warrant to seize them. Mitzi had denied staging the burglary and put suspicion on another woman. Wednesday, we met with Brock's former side girl, Roxanne Hartley. The pregnant businesswoman had allegedly conceived via a donor and claimed to have been trying to help the police by calling in tips. Unfortunately, she was only interested in implicating Mitzi Kensington. But thanks to Chewy's charming ways, Roxanne suggested another woman might have worn stilettos to Brock's house that fateful night. We set off to interview Brock's business associate at Avamar, where we, plus a spicy burrito, made Max Harris sweat until he gave us the name Coco LaBelle. Today, Thursday, we met Coco at the nail salon and left with a pair of Megan's diamond earrings. Derek opened the envelope and shook the earrings onto my table.
Abby, what items did the Kensingtons report missing after the burglary?
A couple of small computer tablets plus $300 in cash, I said. Those things had all been on the bar counter of that room downstairs she used as a living room. There was no mention of stolen jewelry. He flicked at the earrings with one finger.
The Kensingtons may be wealthy, but these earrings are enough carats for even someone like Megan to notice missing. It's strange she didn't report this to the police.
She could have overlooked them, or maybe Coco LaBelle swapped them out with fakes.
Fakes!
Derek laughed and then abruptly stopped.
Sorry, I thought you were joking.
My cheeks burned with embarrassment. Forget it, I said.
He
said, zoning out.
Speaking of fakes, the stiletto prints in the yard might have been fakes. Someone else could have gotten a pair of shoes exactly like Mitzi's, stamped them into the ground, and then swapped them with the ones in her walk-in closet.
I raised my eyebrows. And you thought fake diamond earrings sounded far-fetched?
He said again. I just hate it when people lie to me and to the police.
Who lied? Mitzi?
Occam's razor,
he said.
The simplest explanation is the right one. Mitzi's shoes fit the footprints perfectly, and they're stained. My first hunch was right. Mitzi came home, found her husband dead, and then she altered the crime scene. He must have died nude, which is why the technicians didn't find any wet blood on his shirt.
If he was nude, it must have been a lover. We need to check on Roxanne Hartley's alibi. I scribbled a line and a question mark on the whiteboard. I could make some phone calls tomorrow and do that. He squinted at the whiteboard.
I appreciate the offer, but it's a fertility clinic. They've got patient confidentiality rules.
But you've got your ways, right? As a highly skilled professional detective? He kept squinting at the diagrams.
Not everyone's a highly skilled professional. What if the killer was a hitman, but not a very good one, and he messed up the job? People make mistakes.
Sure, but this isn't like McDonald's forgetting to pack your French fries in your order. Wouldn't a paid assassin do the one thing he was paid to do? Derek continued to stare at the board.
You'd be surprised,
he said.
At least McDonald's has training programs and supervisors. Not so much the assassin business.
I pulled a chair over to the whiteboard and sat facing it. Coco was involved somehow. I had printed out the social media photo Kiko had alerted me to, and it was now stuck to the board with an alphabet magnet borrowed from my refrigerator. I straightened the picture. I'd hoped it would be the breakthrough clue to crack the case, but it hadn't done anything except add a mess of lines.
Coco LaBelle and Chad Harris,
Derek mused.
Maybe he found out she was borrowing Megan's jewelry.
Yes, I said. There's got to be something there. This picture's got to mean something. I tapped it for emphasis.
Then again, Norfolk isn't exactly New York City,
Derek said.
How'd you find that photo anyway?
I couldn't tell him I had been complaining about him to my best friend and inadvertently given her enough details to figure out which case we were working. It was on the internet, I said vaguely. He narrowed his eyes at me. We could interview Chad, I said, or meet Coco again if we can afford it.
We can afford it,
he said. So, do you want me to call her agency?
Not yet. Sometimes paths cross and it doesn't mean anything.
He gathered the papers on the table into a neat pile, put the earrings back into the envelope, and stroked the grain of the wood table. He continued.
For example, my grandson is now the proud owner of your old yellow kitchen table. Does it mean anything? Yes and no.
What? I crossed my arms.
You have this new designer table, and my grandson has your old one. Are you collaborating on a murder?
I tapped my fingers on my arms. It was 3 o'clock now, and I hadn't eaten since breakfast. As my blood sugar dropped, so did my patience. Explain yourself,
I demanded. Explain how you know about the table, or I'm quitting. You can take your homicide files and your dog and get out.
Easy now, he said. You're going to laugh when you hear this one.
Try me.
My grandson moved here a year ago. I've been meaning to check on him, so I took this case so I could write off a trip to see him. I saw him on Monday night, and he told me about the blonde he met earlier that evening. He said he had met a hot, rich girl.
You're full of crap. I crossed my arms tighter. There's no way you could know unless you've been spying on me. What did you do, you crazy old man? Plant a bug on me? A hidden camera? Despite the venom I was spitting his way, Derek looked nothing but amused.
My grandson is an artist, an extremely talented artist.
He calmly pulled out his phone, thumbed through some photos, and then handed it to me. On the screen was an image of me. Not a photo, but a drawing. It was barely more than a sketch, a few squiggly lines and patches of cross-hatching for shadows, but it was me. Redbeard is your grandson, I said. My voice croaked with embarrassment. I really needed some food.
His name's Josh. My daughter wanted to name him Derek after me, but I didn't want to burden a brand new baby with the weight of someone else's name. Nobody else in the family is named Josh.
I handed back the phone. He's really talented. You must be so proud. Derek beamed with pride.
Let's hold off on the champagne until Josh sells a few of his pieces for cash.
He tucked the phone away.
The kid looks up to me, so I try to be supportive. When a boy doesn't have a strong male role model in his life, he can go astray or latch on to the closest thing to a substitute.
I turned to face the whiteboard. People can go astray so easily, I agreed.
Anything you want to talk about, Abby? Anything bothering you?
Just this case, I said, keeping my back to my boss. It's such a tangled mess.
Well, your drawing skills don't help,
he said lightly. I reached for the wadded-up paper towel I'd been using as an eraser and started removing lines and names from the whiteboard. This board was a stupid idea. I'm sorry for all my stupidity today.
Hold on, Derek said. Don't erase that.
I'll do a better one, I said, removing lines.
Freeze!
He sounded serious, so I froze.
Derek said, put down the eraser and step back carefully.
I did so.
Tell me what you see,
he said. A big mess by a clumsy non-artist.
Look closer,
he said, yanking the cap off a red marker.
You'll see who killed Brock Kensington.
He added some arrows and a new timeline. I blinked at the board, stunned. Everything was there, right in front of our eyes. Chapter 11, 8:15 p.m., my apartment. Owen let himself in and gave me a surprised look.
Abby, you actually look happy to see me. What a nice change from your usual sour look.
I'm just happy. I did something good today.
With that detective guy? Did you quit?
Supportive as usual. Never mind. He came over to where I was sitting and sniffed my wine glass. Want some? I asked.
Sure, I'll have a glass of that plonk you buy by the box.
Owen's mouth always ruined things, but if I distracted him with kissing, he would find a way to make me feel good, even if it didn't last. And I didn't care about tomorrow, only tonight and celebrating. I got up from the couch and leaned in to kiss him. He pulled away jerkily.
Hold your horses,
he said.
I gotta take a leak.
Sure. I went to the kitchen, refilled my glass, and poured him one. He was wrong about the wine being plonk. After Derek left with Chewy, I'd run out to the store and bought a bottle of Owen's favorite Chardonnay. It was just like him to not recognize a good thing when it was right under his nose. Down the hallway, the water for the shower switched on.
Later that night, when we were in bed and setting the alarm clock for the next morning, I asked Owen why he'd had a shower after getting home. He kissed my bare shoulder and said, "Don't you like me better when I'm not stinky and sweaty? I even used your fluffy yellow scrubber thing and your body wash that smells like flowers." "You did smell nice," I said, clicking off the lamp. "But you showered this morning. What did you do today that made you sweaty?" "I don't like your suspicious tone, but if you must know, I took the boat out after work. That's why I was late getting home." Home. I didn't like how he was referring to my apartment as home. Just because he had a key, that didn't make anything official. "Owen, you don't live here," I said. "This isn't your home. It's mine." "My name's on the lease," he said. "It's more mine than yours." He kissed my shoulder and neck. "Don't be cranky, Abby. You know I love you." I stayed on my side with my back to him, resisting his charms as best I could. "But it's not your home." Softly he said, "I really do love you." "I know," I whispered. Owen loved me. He also loved his wine, his boat, his friends, buying expensive gifts, impressing strangers, and sleeping with other girls. He especially loved sleeping with other girls when he was in a committed relationship. I knew because I'd been the other girl, the side girl, the girl in the shadows. We'd met a year earlier, last June, when I had been a food server at the yacht club. He was there with a busty brunette who kept flashing her giant engagement ring in everyone's face. I didn't mind the girl. She was the sort of happy-go-lucky, boisterous party girl I wished I could be. She told jokes and was the center of attention for their table of 8. Owen, meanwhile, couldn't have looked more bored if he had been asleep. I thought he was cute, with his bright red hair and the freckles on his nose. The other guys at the table were all cut from the same sandy-haired wasp cloth. Attractive, but boring. When I rolled out the dessert tray, Owen caught my attention by taking my hand in his. His touch had been electric, right from the start. Sparks shot from him, up my arm and through my body. I hadn't been touched by a guy in ages. He must have sensed my need, smelled it on me. He clutched my fingers in his warm palm and gazed up at me, grinning impishly. "Do you have anything stronger than coffee?" he'd asked. The others at the table paid no attention. His brunette fiancée continued telling a story about one of her professors. I let the grinning redhead hold my hand. The tip of his nose was flaking from a sunburn. "Any ideas?" he asked. "I need something to wake me up." "I could make you a shot in the dark," I said. "That's a shot of espresso poured into a cup of brewed coffee." He licked his lips and stroked my fingers in a movement that seemed designed to send shivers through me. He glanced at my name tag before locking gazes with me. "Abby, I'd love a shot in the dark, but only if you make it. Can you do that for me? A shot in the dark with your beautiful hands?" "Sure," I said, my voice thick and my mouth dry. "The espresso machine is over by the bar, so as soon as I finish with the dessert tray, I'll go over there and make one for you." "By the bar?" He raised his eyebrows and bit his lower lip suggestively. "Yes," I said huskily. "In 10 minutes." I felt the burn of eyes on me. His fiancée had finally noticed our hand contact and was shooting me daggers. I wrenched my hand free of his grasp and hid it behind my back. She scowled at me before going back to her anecdote. I turned away and finished handing people their dessert selections. Their words were a blur, and they must have thought I was an idiot, the way I had to ask them to repeat themselves. 10 minutes later, I was at the bar making Owen's shot in the dark when I heard a bird call whistle coming from the nearby hallway. I left the bar, entered the hallway, and was anything but surprised to find Owen standing there, waiting for me. Without a word, he kissed me. I kissed him back with a ferocity that scared me. All week, I'd been deliberating over whether to leave the city for a job offer or stay, and whether to stay in my crowded shared rental house or move out on my own. I'd been so gripped with indecision that I'd been late for my shift that day because I couldn't even decide what to wear. But kissing Owen was a relief from all that indecision. I didn't have to wonder, because I knew it was wrong. So wrong. But it felt so good. He kept me as his side girl after that. He claimed he wanted to break things off with his fiancée because the relationship was all but over, but an engagement was a bigger deal than simply dating. His father and her father had been business associates for years. The way Owen talked about it, you'd think they were royal families from two warring countries negotiating a treaty through marriage. You'd think the fate of humanity rested on him finding the right time to break it to Justine. While I didn't have Owen all to myself, what I had of him was as good as or better than any other relationship I'd had. He was attentive when we were together. He didn't like the looks my roommates gave him, so he pulled some strings and got me my apartment at a discounted rate. He stipulated that it would be his name on the lease, but it was such a great deal I couldn't say no. I could never say no to Owen. At least, not for very long. As we lay in the dark that night, a year into our tumultuous on-off relationship, I wondered how many breaks my heart could take and how much pain I deserved for doing things I knew were wrong.
"You're too quiet over there," he said. "Are you passed out from all that cheap wine?"
"Just thinking about stuff. I told you I had a big day." He grabbed my shoulder and rolled me over playfully, chuckling.
"Want me to take your mind off your worries?"
"Yes," I whispered. And he did. In the light of morning, everything was clear. It might have been the dreams I'd had all night, or it might have been the way I was looking forward to the rest of the day. Looking forward instead of looking back. While Owen slept, I got up, showered, dressed, made some phone calls, and then returned to the bedroom where Owen was only semi-conscious. I yanked open the curtains. Sunshine flooded the bedroom. He groaned and pulled a pillow over his face. "This room gets incredible light in the morning," I said. "The whole apartment does." From under the pillow he agreed groggily.
"It's a great apartment, great location."
"And you really want to move in? Fully and completely?" He pulled the pillow away and gave me a skeptical look.
"I might still spend the odd night at my dad's house."
"Fine by me," I said. "When are you moving the rest of your things in?" He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and gave me a dazed look.
"I'll call the movers, probably early next week."
"Perfect. I can't wait." He gave me a boyish grin.
"I like your hair that way. You look so polished and put together."
He patted the bed next to him.
"Come here and let me mess up your makeup."
I stayed where I was. "I think you're going to be very happy here, Owen. It's a beautiful apartment, a great bachelor pad." He sat up in bed.
"Bachelor pad? What?"
I held my arms out wide. "It's all yours, babe. I'm moving out. I should be cleared out by Monday when you move the rest of your things in." He snorted and stretched his arms over his head.
"Abby, be reasonable. What are you worked up about? Is this because I didn't want to hear about your temp job?"
He patted the bed again.
"Come here and tell me all about it."
"No, this isn't about my temp job. I know you've been seeing someone else, another girl. That's why you showered last night. You didn't want me to smell her on you."
"You're paranoid,"
he said, pointing a finger at me. "Maybe I am, but I also have a very good sense of smell. Not as good as a beagle's, but good enough. I pulled your clothes out of the laundry and I smelled them. She's all over you, this other girl. This is crazy. He crossed his arms. You're a paranoid underwear sniffer. I guess it's a good thing you're moving out because I don't need this much crazy in my life. Admit it, Owen. Be a man and admit that you're cheating on me. Cheating, he snorted. Be a man. Who was it? I saw Justine yesterday at the club. She's going through a really hard time. Maybe she hugged me a few times, but I swear nothing happened. I didn't relapse again, I swear. You swear? But your word means nothing. I crossed the room to the door. It wasn't a huge room, but I felt the weight of every step. This was it. I'd go to Kiko's place tonight and I wouldn't set foot in the apartment again by myself. He called after me. Come back and tell me about your work. Why'd you have the whiteboard out? Come back, Abby. Come back? Never again. Goodbye, Owen. I strode out the front door. Goodbye, great apartment with the amazing views and great light. Goodbye, feeling wrong. Goodbye. Chapter 12. Friday, 2:35 p.m. Norfolk Police Department. Detective Clark came into the interview room with a big smile on her face. Diamond, you've surpassed my expectations, she said as she took the seat across the table from us. You've been on the case for how long? Derek looked down at the dog on his lap. How long, Chewy? Chewy cocked her head to the side expressively. Beagles were bred for hunting, but they also convey near-human emotions in the most adorable manner. Derek looked up at Detective Clark. Since Monday, so that's 5 days. Not my fastest, but I'm not as spry as I used to be. Hey, they don't make any of us as good as they used to, she said with a chuckle, ruffling her own short, mostly gray hair. This work will put the miles on you, Derek said. Sure will, she agreed. Ugh! Were they going to exchange tips for getting seniors discounts next? I couldn't take it anymore. I was going to implode from curiosity. I blurted out, what was inside the safe? She gave me a tight smile. You get right to the point now, don't you? The safe, I said. Did the locksmith get in? Our specialist did get into Mr. Kensington's home safe, she said, her smile broadening. Derek leaned forward. And what was in there? Not much, she said. Nothing of any significant economic value. He smiled. Clark, you are nothing if not a master of suspense. Tell me before I send Chewy after you. 2 drink tumblers, she said. We pulled good prints off both of them, and one matches the deceased, Brock Kensington. Glasses, Derek said, nodding. Okay, I thought it was going to be the weapon, whatever smacked him on the head, but this is better. What about the other one? I asked. The killer's prints. No match in the system, Clark said. But we'll canvass, and I know we'll get this one closed, thanks to you two. You're welcome, Derek said. We couldn't have done it without you, she said. He glanced over at me and started pushing his chair back. That's great to hear. I guess we'll be on our way before you start piling unsolved cases on my lap. Hey, now there's an idea, she said, rubbing her hands. What's your availability? That's not up to me, he said with a sly smile. He set Chewy on the ground and started walking around the table toward the door. I jumped up and followed after him. We said goodbye to the other officers we had met throughout the week. 10 minutes later, we were back in the rental car again with me in the driver's seat. I stared at the keys in my hand. Now what? I asked. We type up the reports. He fastened his seatbelt. You should be done by 5, just like your contract for the week says. But what about looking the killer in the eyes when you make the bust? They don't all go that way, he said.
I had to hand it off to the police. I couldn't exactly get access to the Kensington house again, much less break into their safe. I mean, I could, but it would break chain of custody for the evidence.
I could feel my lower lip trying to jut out in a pout. Grow up, Abby. This is just so anticlimactic, I said.
Typing reports can be fun, he said. We'll order pizza again.
I tossed the keys onto the dashboard. No, I said.
Fine, we'll get sushi or Chinese or whatever you want.
I mean, no. I'm not doing any more work until you answer some questions.
One question, he said. You've been a very capable assistant this week. I'll write you a letter of recommendation, and I'll answer one question.
Who are we working for?
We work for Diamond Investigations.
I turned to him and gave him my most serious look, the same one I'd given Owen that morning when I'd walked. You said you'd answer one question. Are you not a man of your word? He winced.
Diamond Investigations is a division of Diamond Corp. I'll save you the trouble of Googling it. Diamond Corp is a conglomerate of corporations that includes a large international insurance company. The fact that my last name is Diamond is actually a coincidence.
You're an insurance investigator?
When I'm working on a case related to insurance, yes. Please don't call me that, though. It sounds so boring.
He made a gagging face. With a wimpy voice, he said,
Hi, I'm Derek, and I'm an insurance investigator.
Someone had a big life insurance policy on Brock Kensington?
More like 3 big policies, he said. The bank had one in relation to his house, but that wasn't through us. Our concern was the policy put in place by Avamar International and the family policy that had Mitzi as the beneficiary.
That explains a lot. In a softer voice, I added, Can you say how much money's involved?
Over $10 million, he said. So you can see why I had some money to throw around for things like investing in some new clothes for my assistant.
I breathed in deeply. $10 million. I should have bought the more expensive suit.
You did well this week, he said. I'll see what else I can throw your way in the form of a bonus.
I held up my hand. No need. I'm not a charity case, and I'm done taking handouts.
So be it.
He glanced at the keys on the dash.
We should get to those reports if you want to be finished by 5.
I grabbed the keys and started the car. Derek muttered about his phone ringing and took a call. I drove toward my apartment, distracted by fears that Owen had done something stupid after I'd left that morning, such as throw out all my belongings. Derek said something that cut through my imaginary disaster scenarios.
Yes, I have some handcuffs in my kit.
I kept my eyes on the road and my ears on his conversation. He made a series of one-grunt answers and finished with, Detective Clark, you know you can count on me. After he ended the call, I gave him a minute before asking, Something wrong?
There's good news and bad news. Since you're a bad news first gal, I'll start there. One of the suspects is on the run. The good news is we might get that face-to-face confrontation we're both hungry for.
What should we do? Who is it?
It's the one you like as the killer.
I fist-pumped the air next to the steering wheel. I knew it!
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Detective Clark suggested we check the cottage owned by Avamar International, up the coast. It's a remote place to hide out while preparing to flee the country.
He turned to check the back seat, which was empty except for Chewy's round bed and dog supplies.
The address is in the files, which are in the trunk. You'll have to pull over.
No need. I checked my mirrors, hit the brakes, and made a U-turn on the road. The address is 357 Spinnaker Drive, just off Freemason Road.
How the devil did you do that? Have you got one of those Rain Man brains? I mean, really, I can't for the life of me even remember what a spinnaker is.
A spinnaker is a three-cornered sail set forward of the mainsail of a yacht, and yes, I've got one of those Rain Man brains, but I don't count cards, and I won't set foot in a casino, so don't even ask. He went quiet, not commenting further. We drove for 10 minutes in silence. I silently cursed myself for being so harsh. So what if everyone who ever learned of my memory abilities compared me to a character in a movie that had been made before I was even born? Why couldn't I take comfort in how predictable people were and just roll with it? Finally, he said,
"Why are you temping?"
"Because I'm not sure what I want to do with my life. I can't decide."
"What's the most fun at a job you've ever had?"
"This last week."
"Then you're a detective. Or you will be, if we survive this next bit."
It was nearing 4 o'clock on Friday when we reached the cottage owned by Avamar International Shipping Corporation. The remote house was used as a vacation property by the executives at Avamar and their families.
"Keep driving,"
Derek said in a hushed voice.
"We'll park up the road and double back."
"Yes, boss," I said, also in a hushed voice. There was no way the suspect could hear us inside the rental car, but my nerves were so jangled. Speaking softly had to be instinctual, a holdover from human days before the invention of cars. We parked away from the cottage, stepped out of the car, and closed our doors softly. Derek opened the trunk of the car and unlocked a briefcase I hadn't seen him open before. Inside was a sight that made me gasp. A handgun, gun holster, bullets, handcuffs, and some other items that looked deadly.
"You can wait here in the car,"
Derek said as he slipped off his blazer and pulled the holster onto his tall, broad frame. My voice trembling, I said, "And miss all the fun? No way." He turned to face me, both hands hidden behind his back.
"Pick a hand,"
he said. "Do I get a gun?" He grinned and repeated,
"Pick a hand."
I touched his left elbow. He nodded and held out a chunky bar of metal with round holes.
"Brass knuckles,"
he said.
"The other hand is bear spray. Want to swap your choice?"
I shook my head and took the brass knuckles. I tried them on, practiced punching the inside of my palm lightly, and then slipped the metal bar into a pocket.
"If things go smoothly, you won't need to use that,"
he said.
"But if things don't go smoothly, I'd still rather you don't use that. Save yourself. Start running and don't stop. The world doesn't need another dead hero."
He gave me a grave look as he pulled his blazer back on over the gun harness.
"Don't be a dead hero."
"I'll run," I said. "I'm good at that."
"Stay calm and focus on being my witness."
He pulled from the suitcase a small device that looked like the hands-free earpiece for a phone. He fiddled with it before looping it over his ear.
"This unit will be recording everything, but it has a limited field of view."
I nodded. "I'll have my eyes and ears open." He tapped his temple.
"Use that great memory of yours. Make sure your Rain Man brain is switched on."
"It's never off," I said. He paused and stared at me. A light summer breeze rustled through the nearby trees. All was calm. The calm before the storm.
"What's that like?"
he asked.
"Having a powerful memory."
I looked off at the lush trees. It's hard to forgive when you can't forget. I turned back to see him blink twice, like I was coming into focus for the very first time, and then he turned and led the way to the front door of the cottage. On the porch, he immediately tapped on the door 3 times and adopted a deep voice with a casual tone.
Hey in there. Delivery. Come on, man, I got ice cream melting out here."
A woman's voice replied,
"Wrong house. We didn't order anything."
Derek shuffled his feet loudly on the wooden porch and swore. I hadn't heard him curse before, but this was a new character. He rapped on the door again.
"Hey, lady, can I use your phone? Come on, you want some ice cream?"
He swore again and stomped both feet impatiently. The door swung open. A patchy-faced Megan Kensington was staring back at us, her tiny blue eyes rimmed in red. She gasped and immediately tried to shut the door again, but Derek's foot was blocking the open door. He pushed forward, slipping into the cottage like a shadow. Gravel scraped behind me on the driveway. I wheeled around to see Megan's mother, Mitzi Kensington, jumping out of her vehicle. She hadn't turned off the engine or put it in park, so the car continued to roll forward, stopping only when the bumper hit a bench made from driftwood. The car's computer chimed and played its recorded voice alert. "Driver's side door is ajar. Driver's side door is ajar." Mitzi flew up the steps like a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, glaring at me. Her hands were raised in fists. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pushed my fingers through the holes in the brass knuckles. "I'm just a secretary," I said. "Derek's inside." Mitzi pushed past me into the house. She rushed to her daughter and they hugged. Derek shot me a meaningful look.
"Megan says she's alone."
He pointed to 2 takeout coffee containers on the table in the cottage's small sitting room. "Now what?" I asked. He looked pointedly at my lumpy pocket and said,
"Stand down. Now we talk."
I eased my sweating fingers out of the chunk of metal and shook out my hand. To the Kensington women, he said,
"Since we're all here, let's have a chat."
Mitzi and Megan hit him with a barrage of verbal outrage. How dare he interrupt their vacation, after everything he had put them through? He waited it out, repeatedly saying he wasn't going anywhere, but they were free to call the police at any time. They didn't like that option much. After 10 minutes of arguing, they agreed to talk. Derek took a tall back chair in the corner of the sitting room, facing the front door. Chewie sat quietly at his feet, her eyes watchful as she sniffed the air. I sat on the edge of a daybed, and the 2 blondes sat next to each other on the sofa, Mitzi with her arm protectively around her daughter. Derek said,
"When you arrived home from your shopping trip at 9 o'clock on April 5th, what room was Brock Kensington in?"
The blondes exchanged a look. Mitzi said, "The kitchen, just like I told the police."
"No,"
Derek drawled slowly.
"He was not in the kitchen, not where he was when the police arrived. You moved him and staged the scene."
Mitzi shook her head. "I did no such thing."
"The drive from the airport at that time of day is only 15 minutes. We know what time your plane landed and what time Chad drove out of the paid parking lot. Unless traffic had been heavier than usual, you were home for a good 20 minutes before you called 911.
Mitzi glanced at her daughter. "Traffic was bad that night, right?" Megan swallowed but didn't say anything.
"There was no traffic,"
Derek said.
"The Admirals weren't playing at the Scope that night. No concerts either. No accidents. Your drive home was as clean as a whistle. You got home and you staged the burglary."
Megan shifted away from her mother on the couch. "So what if we had?" she asked plaintively. "I'm just asking as a purely hypothetical question." Mitzi whipped her arm out, lightning fast, and slapped her daughter across the cheek. Megan whimpered and moved to the edge of the sofa. Mitzi lifted her arm to strike her daughter again. The room blurred. I launched myself at Mitzi and grabbed her by the shoulders. I growled, "Don't you dare!" My face was so close to hers, our noses were touching. I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Derek grabbed my upper arms with a surprising amount of strength and hauled me back. He set me back on the edge of the daybed and murmured in my ear,
"That's your adrenaline running the show. You need to get a hold of yourself or you can go wait in the car."
"I'm okay," I said hoarsely. "I'll be good." Across the small sitting room, Mitzi gave me a weirdly smug smile. It reminded me of those kids in school who delighted in getting others in trouble. I gave her the same smile back. I wasn't in nearly as much trouble as she was. We all stared at each other in silence as a full 2 minutes passed. Derek reached into his blazer for something. I tensed.
The women on the couch watched him warily. He didn't pull out his gun, though. He turned to me and asked,
"Where are those diamonds?"
"You gave them to Detective Clark," I said.
"Right."
He frowned.
"I would have liked to have had them to throw onto the coffee table right about now, but I guess I'll make do."
To Megan, he said,
"Someone stole a pair of diamond earrings from your bedroom, but you didn't report it to the police after the burglary because you didn't even check your jewelry that night. You knew it wasn't a robbery. We have proof you knew. Now, enough with the hypothetical questions. Make things easier for yourself and tell us what happened when you and your mother got home from the airport."
Another minute passed before Megan broke the silence. "One of Dad's whore girlfriends killed him. She tied him to the bed and left him there for us to find." Derek looked at Mitzi.
"Is this true?"
Mitzi remained stiffly upright and mimed zipping her lips shut.
"Which room?"
he asked. "Mom and Dad's bedroom," she said. With that admission, Mitzi seemed to crumble like someone had removed the pins holding her upright. She leaned limply to the side, resting her elbow on the arm of the sofa. She said to her daughter dully, "You don't know what you're doing. Now everyone will feast on our humiliation." Megan gave me a pleading look. "Am I in a lot of trouble? It was all my mother's idea to move the body and make it look like somebody broke in." Derek kept his gaze locked on Mitzi.
"Poor little Mitzi Kensington. So worried about what the other rich ladies will think. And now it's going to cost you $5 million.
Mitzi straightened up immediately. "Shut up," she spat. "That money's mine. I didn't kill him. Sure, that whore did me a favor and I was happy to let her get away with it, but I'm innocent." Derek gave her a taunting smile.
"But you aided in the homicide, even if it was after the fact. That violates your agreement with the insurance carrier."
He made a tisk-tisk sound.
"Mitzi, you should have read all the boring fine print of your contract before you aided in the murder of your husband."
He leaned forward and tented his fingers.
"Now, which whore do you think it was?"
She spat a volley of curse words at him, finishing with, "How should I know?" Megan interjected, "We don't know, I swear. We don't know who did it, but she smeared my mother's lipstick all over his face. What kind of sick person does that?"
"A very sick person,"
Derek said.
"What if Brock Kensington was killed by someone who didn't have any lipstick of their own?"
He got up, paced the living room once, and chose a different seat, closer to the door and facing the window. "Who?" Megan asked. Derek turned to me.
"Abby, what were the words Brock's business associate, Mr. Harris, used to describe his relationship with his son, Chad Harris?"
His exact words were, "My son hasn't looked up to me since he was 5. He latches on to anyone but me. I swear he only started dating that sickly gerbil Megan so he could get himself into a new family. Chad loves the Kensington. He says they're everything our family isn't." Megan tilted her head to the side. "Max called me a sickly gerbil?"
"You're missing the big picture,"
Derek told her. Megan sniffed. "What?"
"Love is a powerful emotion," Derek said. "Most enemies are former friends. Nobody but someone who loved you once can be bothered to make the effort to hate. And Chad loved Brock."
"Oh no," Mitzi gasped. "Not Chad. Not him, anyone but him." Derek continued.
"Chad told you he didn't get your message about the plane being delayed. He told you he showed up at the airport at 7 and decided to hang out in the lounge for 2 hours rather than drive home and back again 2 hours later. He told the police the same thing, and they believed him, based on nothing more than a parking lot receipt. But when young Chad took a ticket from the dispenser at 6:45, Brock Kensington was tied up, either tied to a bed or trussed up in that exercise equipment you dismantled not long after his death."
"Why?"
asked Megan. Why would he want to hurt my father? You said so yourself. Chad worshipped my father. I don't know why the police are trying to talk to him again now, but he doesn't trust cops. They've done horrible things to him in the past, and he's scared. They're bullying him.
Chad must have found out something that rattled him to the core, Derek said. His hero and new father figure wasn't such a hero after all. In the spring, Chad met a young woman who goes by Coco LaBelle at a friend's bachelor party. That meeting might not have been a coincidence. I think Coco wanted to leak information back to her former rival that she was having an affair with Megan's father.
Megan scowled. That slut, she said, annoyed but not surprised. She had known. The glasses, I interjected. Megan, you thought Coco's fingerprints were on the tumblers, so when you got home that night, you put the glasses into your father's safe to preserve the evidence just in case you needed it later. You did that without your mother knowing, and you changed the combination so your mother couldn't discover them and destroy the evidence. Mitzi took in this new information and shook her head at her daughter. If looks could kill, Megan would have been wounded. But the fingerprints and DNA evidence belonged to Chad, I said. That's what's going to put him away. No, Megan said. You're wrong. Chad wouldn't do that.
The first part might not have been premeditated, Derek said. Chad called the escort agency, canceled the appointment, and went to talk some sense into Brock. Let's say they had a drink, argued, and then things got out of control. When Brock turned his back, Chad grabbed the nearest thing, probably the bottle they had been drinking from, and struck him on the back of the head. When he was unconscious, Chad got him tied up inside that exercise contraption. Because Brock was upside down, the blood from his head wound didn't drip onto his shirt.
Maybe he did what you said, Mitzi said, but Chad couldn't have killed Brock. Someone else must have gotten into the house and strangled him with his belt. Chad is a good boy. Plus, he was at the airport when it happened.
Chad is a smart boy, Derek said. He walked into the airport, bought a paperback with his credit card, and quietly slipped away again. He drove out of the parking lot, paying the lost ticket maximum fee in cash to preserve the ticket for his alibi. He returned to the Kensington residence where he strangled Brock. In his head, he probably thought he was doing the rest of the family a favor. When it was done, he staged the death to look like a sexual escapade gone wrong.
Mitzi pressed her fingers to her lips. He must have used my lipstick, she said. He had my shade all over his face. She turned to her daughter. Chad killed your father. Chad didn't do anything wrong, Megan said. When they test that slut Coco, the police will find out it was her. She killed my father. Derek made a tisk-tisk sound.
Young Coco's had her share of run-ins with the police, Derek said. Her prints are on file and they've already been checked. No match. It's time for you both to start cooperating. Distance yourself from Chad Harris before he pulls you down with him.
You're lying, Megan said, just like when you said you were from the movie studio. She turned to her mother and said, He's lying. They both are. Somebody's trying to frame Chad. He didn't do this.
Let's hear it from the young man himself, Derek said.
He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted,
Chad Harris, come out from the bedroom with your hands over your head where I can see them. I'm armed and I will shoot you if necessary.
True to his word, he pulled out his gun and pointed it at the doorway to the bedroom. I watched the bedroom door with breathless anticipation. All four of us sitting in the living room, plus the beagle, watched the doorway. A shadow shifted across the doorway, growing larger. A body was moving toward the room's light source rather than away, toward the window. He's going out the window, I said, jumping to my feet. Megan got up quickly and rushed to my side. She clutched my arm, her little fingers like damp claws. She said, You'll never catch him. He'll be on the boat and sailing away to Mexico in no time.
We'll see about that,
Derek said. He grabbed both of the takeout coffee cups from the coffee table and held them in front of the beagle.
Chewie, which one is the boy?
Chewie nudged one of the containers with her nose.
This is a bad guy,
Derek said.
The bad guy.
Chewie barked sharply.
Get him,
Derek said, his voice as cold as steel.
Get the bad guy.
He didn't have to tell her twice. Chewie practically flew into the bedroom and out the open window. I followed right on her tail. I jumped out the window. The heels of my shoes sank into the soft lawn. I stepped out of the shoes and continued the chase barefoot. Behind me, I heard Derek call out,
I'm going out the front door, but I'm right behind you. Abby, don't...
I didn't hear the rest of his warning. I didn't hear anything except Chewie's excited baying ahead of me. Chapter 13. The world was a blur. Chad's head was bobbing right in front of me, barely out of reach. The dog's excited baying sounded like screams. I ran. At first, my bare feet hurt, but then I couldn't feel them at all. I ran through the woods, leaping over fallen logs, keeping my stride measured. He was faster than me, but I had more stamina. I would wear him down, and thanks to Chewie, I wouldn't lose his scent. He dodged left and right through the woodsy trails that crisscrossed the ravine between the cottages. The ocean lay ahead. I pumped the air with my left arm as I reached my right hand into my pocket. The weight of the metal pleased me. I slipped my fingers through the holes and pumped the air with my right arm. Faster. Either I was going faster or he was going slower. He peered back over his shoulder, fear in his eyes. He looked nothing like Owen, except for his cowardly eyes. His fear made me feel more sure, more certain than I'd ever been in my life. He climbed awkwardly over a fallen tree. I hiked my skirt and sailed over. He saw me gaining on him, and he growled over his shoulder, "Leave me alone, you b—" The blow to the back of his head cut off the rest of his words. He went down like a dropped duffel bag. Chewie circled, her baying so loud and excited she sounded like a pack of 40 beagles. Chad rubbed the back of his head and gave me a disgusted look, but he didn't get to his feet. "Stay down," I heard myself say. "Stay right there, Chad Harris." To Chewie, I said, "Shh, sit down. Good girl, it's okay. We got the bad guy." She let out one more final vocalization and then sat. Chad groaned and writhed in a patch of dirt. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. "You're going to be sorry you ever messed with me and my family. I'm going to sue you for everything you'll ever make. Your life is over." "That's funny," I said. "Most people would start claiming their innocence. But not you, Chad. You were ready to run, just like the guilty, disgusting little boy you are. You rich guys think you can get away with anything just because you have money. It might work for a while, but sooner or later, the world sees you for what you are." "You don't know me," he said. The look on his face reminded me of his father, Max, saying, "A man is not his record." He knew. Max knew his son killed Brock. He'd been happy to send us after Coco, his resistance in giving up the name nothing more than a show. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Derek was there, breathing heavily from the run. We must have covered a good mile. Derek cleared his throat and ordered Chad to put his hands behind his back for the cuffs. Sunday, 3:30 p.m. My apartment, soon to be Owen's apartment.
"Abby, how many pairs of running shoes do you own and why?"
I looked up at Derek, who was holding 2 pairs in his hands and comparing them. "The ones on the left are better for trails." He snorted.
"You could have used these on Friday."
I looked down at my socked feet. Under the socks were more than a few bandages. In my pursuit of Chad Harris, my feet had taken quite the beating,
but it had been so worth it to see him go down. In my head, I must have replayed me smacking him on the back of the head 1,000 times. It was my new favorite movie, even better than revisiting my friends in Oz. "Thanks for helping me pack," I said. "Having someone come with me to the apartment has made this whole thing a lot easier."
I had to do it for your ex-boyfriend's protection. Even without the brass knuckles, you might have taken him down with one of your punches.
He chuckled.
Hey, I've got a new nickname for you.
Is it Legally Blonde? Because that's not new. You've called me that 27 times already.
One Punch Silver, he said proudly. It's got a ring to it, like Hi-Ho Silver from the Lone Ranger.
I sighed. It could be worse. One Punch Silver was better than Legally Blonde.
This apartment does get incredible light,
Derek said.
Are you sure you want to give this up?
Mostly sure. Feeling more sure by the minute.
What's next for you? After a week of working with me and Chewy, I bet you'll be happy to clock in Monday with some normal people. Where's the temp agency got you next?
Some boring real estate company. I'll be stuffing envelopes and collating.
You'll be great, and you'll get promoted in no time.
He reached for the packing tape dispenser and used it to seal one of my boxes of shoes. The tight tape made a screeching noise that roused Chewy, who had been lying on the bed watching us. She started vocalizing at the ceiling. Once she had quieted down, I said, "Can I ask you one more question?"
It's great being a detective,
he answered preemptively.
Not every case is as exciting as last week's, but it's a great job and an excellent career choice. With just a bit of training, you could get your own license.
That's not the question I wanted to ask. I sat on the bed next to Chewy, petting her. I traced my finger along the crisp boundaries between her white, tan, and black areas.
Go ahead,
Derek said.
Fire away.
Is Chewy a therapeutic dog? On our last visit to Maggie's diner, we had a different waitress, and she told you to tie the dog up outside. Then you showed her something in your wallet, and she left you alone after that. Derek gave me an unwavering look.
Why would you ask a question you already know the answer to?
It just seems like the right thing to do. Better than making assumptions. He looked at the dog and took a deep breath.
It's also a step 1 question, as in step 1 before you go into step 2, which is establishing a timeline, and then step 3, which is finding out why a classy gentleman such as myself needs a service dog.
I only had one question, I swear. He reached into his back pocket, withdrew his wallet, and came over to sit on the corner of the bed. He handed me a laminated card over the dog's back. The card identified Charmaine D'Angelo Dancer as a registered service dog.
She's got an official yellow vest and everything, he said, but she doesn't like to cover up her pretty saddle.
He patted her on the back.
Plus, the vest attracts too much attention for undercover work.
You guys make a great team, I said. He got up again and returned to packing footwear, his back to me.
I'm not always easy to put up with, but I buy her the best dog treats. Loyalty can be purchased for $5 a bag.
I looked down at Chewy. She looked up at me with big eyes and an innocent look, as if to tell me it wasn't true at all. She'd be loyal even without the fancy treats.
So many shoes,
Derek said, chucking them into boxes. I smiled and returned to packing my side of the room. 2 hours passed in companionable silence. When we were done packing, we stood by the doorway. The movers would be there the next morning to take 90% of my earthly possessions to long-term storage. I would be going to Kiko's that night with 2 suitcases, stuffed full to keep me clothed until I found a more permanent solution.
So, collating,
Derek said.
That sounds awful.
I've heard terrible things, I said. He rubbed his chin.
And the irony is that next week I'll just have to break in a new assistant.
And think up a new nickname for her.
Oh, that's easy. You already know what I call the blonde ones. The brunettes I call Holly Golightly after Audrey Hepburn's character in Weekend at Tiffany's. Most brunettes don't mind.
What do you call the redheads? He got a twinkle in his eyes.
Whatever they want me to call them. You don't mess with redheads.
I laughed and crouched down to pet Chewy. Then I hope you get a redhead next week, I said.
You know, if you wanted to put your career in collating on hold for a week or so, you could come with me.
Really? Do you have a budget for me to travel with you?
You and I just saved our parent company $10 million, so I think you can guess the answer. Chad Harris was on the payroll of Avamar International, which voided their policy as well.
2 out of 2, I said. Diamond Corp must love you.
Well, what do you think? Want to jump on a plane with me and Chewy as we fly off to another adventure?
I stroked Chewy's soft ears as I looked over my shoulder at the apartment. The late afternoon sun bathed the room in gold. I wasn't sure of anything. And then I was. My past was the apartment and my old life, and it was all behind me. Sure, I said. I'd love to stay on another week as your assistant. What time do we fly out?
Tomorrow morning, he said, but not too early, so we've got time tonight to go check out my grandson's art show.
An art show sounds fun.
You'll like Josh, he said. We're a fun family, the Diamonds.
He reached for the heavier of my 2 suitcases.
Here, let me help you with this.
While Derek told me about his grandson's paintings, I wheeled my suitcase out of the apartment and locked the door. This has been Girl in the Shadows, Diamond Files Mystery Book 1. Written by Angela Pepper. Narrated by Tiffany Williams. Produced by Airbending Media Productions, LLC. Copyright 2016 by Angela Pepper Publishing. Production copyright 2016 by Angela Pepper Publishing.